My wife, the CEO, said, "Go wherever you want. If you ever leave me, you'll come crawling back to apologize after another round of disrespect." I replied, "We'll see." Then I moved to another city for a high-paying job. A few weeks later, a woman called me. The rain started just as I pulled into the driveway. Not the gentle kind that whispers against windows and makes you want to curl up with a book, but the angry, relentless kind that hammers against metal and glass like it has something to prove. I sat in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the one with the passenger door that stuck and the air conditioning that only worked when it felt like it, and watched the water sheet down my windshield, blurring the view of the house that had stopped feeling like home somewhere between our 3rd anniversary and now. Our house. Victoria's house, really, if we're being honest. The sprawling modern masterpiece in Brookhaven Estates, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, designer everything, and a monthly mortgage payment that exceeded what most people made in 3 months. She'd bought it 2 years ago without consulting me, just came home one day with the closing papers and a smile that dared me to object. "It's an investment," she'd said, already turning away before I could respond, her Louboutins clicking against the marble foyer with the finality of a judge's gavel. I should have said something then. Should have said a lot of things over the years. But I didn't, and now here I was, sitting in the rain like a coward, rehearsing conversations I'd never have the courage to finish. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Dinner in 20. Don't be late." "No." "Please." "No." "How was your day?" Just an order, issued from the corner office of Meridian Global, where she sat as CEO, queen of a tech empire she'd built with ruthless precision and an emotional detachment that would make a surgeon jealous. 3,000 employees, a valuation somewhere north of $2 billion. Forbes 30 under 30, then 40 under 40, now just 40. Most powerful women in business. And me? I was the husband who taught high school physics, the one she introduced at company events, with a tight smile and tighter grip on my elbow, as if she needed to physically hold me in place, or I might float away and embarrass her. "This is Daniel," she'd say, and there would be a pause, always a pause, before she added, "My husband," like the words tasted strange in her mouth. I gathered my laptop bag and the stack of ungraded papers that seemed to multiply on their own, took a breath that did nothing to steady me, and ran through the rain. The house smelled like jasmine and money when I stepped inside. Victoria's signature scent, custom blended at some boutique in Manhattan where they probably charged more for a bottle of perfume than I made in a week. I could hear her in the kitchen. Or rather, I could hear her voice, sharp and efficient, giving instructions to someone. Probably Maria, the personal chef who came 3 times a week to prepare meals. Victoria never had time to eat. More saffron. And the presentation needs to be cleaner. This isn't a cafeteria. I hung my rain-soaked jacket on the brass coat rack that cost more than my car and made my way toward the kitchen, my shoes squeaking against the polished concrete floors. The sound used to embarrass me. Now it just felt like one more way I didn't quite fit into the life Victoria had built around us. She was standing at the island, still in her work clothes, a charcoal Armani suit that probably cost $4,000. Her dark hair pulled back in the severe bun she wore like armor. Her phone was in one hand, AirPods in her ears, and she was gesturing with her free hand as she spoke to someone about quarterly projections and market penetration strategies. She didn't look up when I entered. I stood there for a moment, waiting, feeling like a guest in my own home. Maria caught my eye and offered a sympathetic smile as she plated what looked like seared scallops with some kind of golden puree and microgreens that probably had their own passport. "I don't care what the board thinks, Marcus. We're moving forward with the acquisition. If they have concerns, they can schedule a meeting with my assistant." Victoria pulled out one AirPod and finally acknowledged my existence with a glance that lasted maybe half a second. "You're wet. It's raining. Obviously." She turned back to her phone. "I need those numbers by morning." "No, not tomorrow afternoon. Morning. 6 a.m. sharp." She ended the call with a tap and looked at me again. Really looked this time. And I watched her catalog every flaw. My damp hair, My off-the-rack shirt that was wrinkled from a day of teaching, the exhaustion that had taken up permanent residence in my shoulders. Rough day? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Every day was rough for Victoria. Every day was a battle she had to win, a mountain she had to conquer, another rung on an infinite ladder she climbed with the single-minded focus of someone who believed rest was weakness. The FDA is dragging their feet on our biotech subsidiary's approval for the new diagnostic platform. Legal thinks we need to refile 3 sections of the application. It's going to delay our launch by at least 8 weeks. She said this like she was reading a grocery list, flat and matter-of-fact, which means 8 weeks of lost revenue, roughly $47 million. I'm sorry. She laughed a short, brittle sound that had no humor in it. Sorry, right, because your sympathy changes anything. Maria set our plates down with a quiet efficiency that came from months of learning to be invisible during these dinners. She murmured something about dessert being in the fridge and disappeared toward the back of the house like smoke. We sat across from each other at the dining table, a massive slab of reclaimed wood that Victoria had found at some architectural salvage place and paid a fortune to have refinished. 8 chairs surrounded it. We used 2. How was school? Victoria asked, cutting into her scallop with surgical precision. This was the dance we did, she asked, because she was supposed to ask. Fine. Jamal Thomas finally grasped the concept of angular momentum, small victories. She chewed slowly, her eyes already distant, her mind clearly somewhere else, probably back in that corner office, probably calculating how to claw back those $47 million. I ate my scallops. They were perfect, of course. Maria never made anything less than perfect, but they tasted like expensive sawdust in my mouth. I need you to come to the gala on Saturday, Victoria said suddenly. Not a request. Never a request. The Children's Hospital fundraiser? No, that's next month. This is the Tech Innovation Summit. Red carpet, press, investors. I need you there. She paused. Try to wear something decent this time. Not that brown suit. You look like a substitute teacher in that. I am a teacher. You know what I mean. I did. I knew exactly what she meant. I was supposed to look like the kind of husband a CEO billionaire would have polished, successful, impressive, not like someone who spent his days explaining Newton's laws to teenagers who would rather be on TikTok. I'll try to find something, I said quietly. Don't try, do. She set down her fork and looked at me with those cold, assessing eyes that had probably made grown men cry in boardrooms. I have a reputation to maintain, Daniel. When people see us together, they need to see a power couple. Not this. Not what? She gestured vaguely at me, a wave of her hand that somehow managed to encompass everything I was and wasn't. You know what? You're not stupid, even if you insist on wasting your intelligence teaching high school. There it was, the cut. The casual cruelty that she delivered like it was nothing, like words were just tools to shape the world into what she wanted it to be. And if some feelings got carved away in the process, well, that was just collateral damage. I should have defended myself, should have reminded her that teaching wasn't waste, that shaping young minds mattered, that not everyone measured success in stock options and quarterly earnings. But I'd learned that defending myself only led to longer arguments that ended the same way, with Victoria winning and me wondering why I bothered. So I just nodded and took another bite of perfect, tasteless scallops. We ate in silence for a while. Outside, the rain continued its assault, and somewhere in the house, a clock ticked away seconds that felt like they were counting down to something I couldn't quite name. I'm thinking about taking a job offer, I said. The words fell into the silence, like stones into still water. I hadn't planned to say them, not yet. Not like this, but suddenly they were out there, real and irreversible. Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down slowly, carefully, with the control of someone who never let anything catch them off guard. What? A job offer. In Seattle. Tech Academy. They need a director of curriculum for their STEM programs. The salary is... I stopped, because even saying it felt surreal. It's significant. How significant? $240,000, plus benefits, plus performance bonuses. Her eyebrows rose, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from her all evening. That's more than respectable. She studied me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. When did this happen? They reached out 3 weeks ago. I've been through 2 rounds of interviews. They made the offer yesterday. 3 weeks. And you're just telling me now? You've been busy. The acquisition, the FDA thing. Don't. She held up a hand, cutting me off with the same gesture she probably used to silence underperforming executives. Don't make this about my schedule. If something matters, you tell me. That's how marriage works. I almost laughed at that. Almost. Is that how it works? Because from where I'm sitting, Victoria, I'm not sure you'd notice if I disappeared for a month. You barely notice I'm here most days. Her eyes narrowed. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about your work, or your schedule, or what you needed from me? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? I asked tonight. You asked because it's what people do at dinner, not because you cared. The air between us crystallized into something brittle and sharp. Victoria's jaw tightened, and I watched her cycle through emotions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, calculation, before landing on the cold control that was her default setting. So what are you saying? You want to move to Seattle? Uproot our entire life because you're having some kind of midlife crisis? I'm 37, Victoria. It's not a midlife crisis. It's called wanting to feel like I matter. You matter. Do I? I leaned forward, and I could feel something inside me cracking open. Something that had been locked away for so long I'd almost forgotten it was there. Because most days, I feel like I'm just another item on your to-do list. Husband, feed, maintain, trot out for photo ops. When was the last time you touched me like you actually wanted to? When was the last time you looked at me like I was anything other than a disappointment? She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're being dramatic. Am I? Tell me I'm wrong, Victoria. Tell me you're happy. Tell me this. I gestured between us. At the expensive house, and the expensive meal, and the expensive life that felt like a beautiful cage, is what you actually want. She stood there, backlit by the recessed lighting that made her look like a figure in a magazine, spread perfect and untouchable, and somehow farther away than ever. What I want, she said slowly, each word precisely enunciated, is a partner who understands that building something meaningful requires sacrifice, not someone who runs away the first time things get difficult. Things have been difficult for 5 years, Victoria. I'm just done pretending they're not. So, you're leaving. Not a question. An accusation. I'm considering it. She laughed again, and this time there was something genuinely amused in it, something that made my skin prickle. Go ahead then. Go wherever you want, Daniel. Take your little job in Seattle. Play director at some tech school. But here's the truth. She walked toward me, stopping close enough that I could smell her jasmine perfume, close enough that I could see the absolute certainty in her eyes. If you ever leave me, you'll come crawling back to apologize. Because this, she gestured around at the house, at the life we'd built. This is the best you're ever going to do. I elevated you. Without me, you're just a high school teacher with delusions of grandeur. The words hit like physical blows, each one calculated and aimed with the precision of someone who knew exactly where to cut to make it hurt most. I stood up slowly, looking at this woman I'd married 8 years ago, this stranger wearing my wife's face, and felt something inside me settle into a calm I hadn't experienced in years. We'll see, I said quietly. What? I said, we'll see. I picked up my plate and walked toward the kitchen, leaving her standing there, in her expensive suit, with her expensive certainty. Behind me, I heard her laugh again, but this time, it sounded forced, uncertain. I loaded my plate into the dishwasher with hands that barely shook at all, and through the window, I watched the rain finally begin to slow, the clouds breaking apart to reveal patches of star-strewn sky. Something was ending. I could feel it in the air, in the sudden space opening up inside my chest where fear had lived for so long. But something else was beginning too. I just didn't know what yet. The spare bedroom had become my refuge over the past 3 months, though neither of us acknowledged it out loud. Victoria called it my office, maintaining the fiction that I worked late into the night on lesson plans and grading. The truth was simpler and sadder. I slept there because sharing a bed with someone who looked at you like a burden was its own kind of torture. That night, after the dinner, after her words had carved themselves into my chest like initials on a tree, I lay on the narrow futon staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere down the hall, Victoria was probably still awake, her laptop screen casting blue light across her face as she answered emails and reviewed contracts, her mind already past our argument and on to the next conquest. She'd forgotten about it already. I knew that with the kind of certainty that comes from years of being forgotten, but I hadn't forgotten, couldn't forget. Her words played on loop in my mind. If you ever leave me, you'll come crawling back to apologize. Without me, you're just a high school teacher with delusions of grandeur. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark. The email from Dr. Sarah Chen at Seattle Tech Academy was still there, waiting. I'd read it probably 50 times since it arrived yesterday afternoon. Daniel, the board has approved our offer. $240K base, full benefits, relocation package, and a signing bonus. We believe you're exactly the kind of innovative thinker our program needs. We hope you'll accept. The future of STEM education needs people like you. Sarah, people like you. When was the last time Victoria had said anything like that? When was the last time she'd looked at me and seen potential instead of disappointment? I picked up the phone and opened the email again, my thumb hovering over the reply button. It would be so easy. 3 words. I accept. Daniel. Send. Done. A new life. A new city. A chance to be someone other than Victoria Ashford's forgettable husband. But marriage wasn't supposed to work like this, was it? You weren't supposed to make life-altering decisions alone in a spare bedroom at midnight while your wife worked in another wing of the house. You were supposed to talk, compromise, build something together. Except we'd stopped building years ago. Now we just existed in parallel, 2 people sharing an address, but not a life. I started typing. Sarah, I need a few days to finalize some personal matters, but I'm ready to accept your offer. Thank you for believing in what I can bring to your program. I'll be in touch with details by Friday. Daniel. My finger hovered over send for a long moment. This was it. The line in the sand. Once I crossed it, there was no going back to the comfortable misery of the status quo. I pressed send. The whoosh of the email leaving my phone felt like jumping off a cliff. My heart hammered against my ribs, adrenaline flooding my system even though I was just lying on a futon in suburban Connecticut, doing nothing more dramatic than sending a work email. But it felt dramatic. It felt like the first real choice I'd made in years. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, but sleep was impossible. My mind raced through logistics, lease terms, moving companies, how to tell my students, how to tell my parents, how to tell Victoria. God, how was I going to tell Victoria? Morning came too early and too bright. I'd finally fallen asleep around 3 and woke to my alarm at 6:30, feeling like I'd been run over by the truck of my own decisions. The house was silent when I emerged from the spare bedroom. Victoria's car was already gone from the driveway she usually left by 6 for her morning routine of exercise, meditation, and whatever else successful people did before the sun was fully up. There was a note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting precise and controlled, even in hastily scrawled Sharpie. Meeting with investors in Boston. Back late. Don't wait up. No, have a good day. No, love you. Just information. Delivered with the emotional content of a weather report. I made coffee in the intimidatingly expensive espresso machine Victoria had bought and never learned to use, watching the dark liquid drip into a cup and wondering if this was what freedom looked like, standing in your own kitchen, drinking coffee, and realizing you felt more alone with someone than you ever had by yourself. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. my teaching colleague, and probably my only real friend. Staff meeting at 7:45. Henderson is on a rampage about state testing scores. Bring coffee and patience. I typed back, be there in 30. Save me a seat, far from the firing line. Another text came through immediately, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Hello, Daniel. This is Sarah Chen from Seattle Tech Academy. I got your email. Welcome to the team. I'm attaching some preliminary paperwork. No rush, but when you're ready, we'd love to start the onboarding process. Excited to have you. Welcome to the team. Excited to have you. Simple words, but they landed in my chest like stones dropped into still water, rippling outward into spaces I'd forgotten existed. When was the last time anyone had been excited about me? Henderson Academy sat in one of those Connecticut towns that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many movies about New England, all brick buildings and old-growth trees, and a sense of history that weighed on everything. I'd been teaching there for 12 years, had seen hundreds of students pass through my physics classes, had won Teacher of the Year twice, and yet somehow still felt like I was playing dress-up as a real educator. Maybe that was Victoria's voice in my head. Hard to tell anymore where her criticisms ended and my own self-doubt began. Marcus was waiting by my classroom when I arrived, holding 2 cups of coffee from the good place downtown, not the sludge from the teacher's lounge. You look like hell, he said cheerfully, handing me a cup. Rough night, Victoria? He asked it carefully. Marcus had been around long enough to know that Victoria was a topic that required delicate handling. When isn't it, Victoria? He nodded, understanding everything I wasn't saying. Marcus had met her exactly 3 times at school functions, where she showed up late, stayed for exactly the minimum acceptable time, and spent most of it on her phone. After the last one, he'd pulled me aside and said, "Man, I know it's not my place, but does she even like you?" I'd laughed it off then, made excuses about her being busy, about her work being demanding, about how successful people operated differently. But the question had burrowed into my brain and set up residence there, whispering to me in quiet moments, "Does she even like you?" Staff meeting in 10, Marcus said, pulling me back to the present. You ready for Henderson's yearly speech about how we're all failing America's youth? Can't wait. We walked toward the faculty meeting room together, and I felt the weight of the decision I'd made pressing against my chest. I should tell him. Marcus was my friend, but saying it out loud would make it real in a way that felt terrifying. I got a job offer, I said suddenly. In Seattle. Marcus stopped walking. What? Seattle Tech Academy, Director of Curriculum. They reached out about a month ago. I accepted last night. His face cycled through surprise, concern, and something that might have been sadness. Seattle. That's across the country. I know. What about Victoria? What about... He gestured vaguely at the building around us. All this? I don't know yet. I mean, I know I'm taking the job. I just don't know how to tell her. Or when. Or... I trailed off. Because the truth was, I didn't know much of anything except that I couldn't keep living the way I'd been living. Marcus studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he clapped a hand on my shoulder. You know what? Good. Good for you, man. You've been sleepwalking through life for years. Maybe it's time to wake up. They're roasting uselv.com. Maybe, I said, but the word felt uncertain in my mouth. The staff meeting was exactly as soul-crushing as expected. Principal Henderson spent 45 minutes explaining how our test scores were down 3% from last year, how the district was implementing new accountability measures, how we all needed to dig deeper and reach higher, and a dozen other phrases that meant nothing and everything at the same time. I sat in the back, drinking my coffee, and thought about Seattle, about rain and coffee shops and mountains you could actually see on the horizon, about starting over in a place where no one knew me as Victoria Ashford's husband first and Daniel Cooper second, about being just Daniel again. The text came during 4th period, right as I was explaining centripetal force to a classroom of juniors who would rather be literally anywhere else. Need to talk tonight. Important. My stomach dropped. Did she know somehow? Had she sensed the shift in me, the way animals sense earthquakes before they happen? I typed back, "Okay. What time?" The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, 7. Be home. Be home. Like I was a teenager being summoned by a parent, not a grown man married to the person texting. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and tried to focus on centripetal force, on the equations and the diagrams and the beautiful simplicity of physics, a universe where actions had predictable reactions, where every force had an equal and opposite force, where nothing was random or cruel or complicated by emotion. If only life worked that way. I got home at 6:30 and found Victoria already there, which was unusual. She was in the living room, still in her work clothes, but with her hair down, another rarity. 2 glasses of wine sat on the coffee table, already poured. This was planned. Whatever was coming, she'd planned it. "Sit," she said, not unkindly, almost gently, actually, which was somehow more unsettling than her usual brusqueness. I sat, taking the wine glass she offered, even though my hands were shaking slightly, and I didn't trust myself to hold it steady. "I've been thinking about last night," Victoria began, swirling her wine in that way people do when they're trying to look contemplative. "About what you said, about Seattle." Here it was, the conversation I'd been dreading. "I may have been harsh," she continued, and the word harsh sounded strange coming from her, like she was speaking a foreign language phonetically. "You caught me off guard, and I reacted poorly. That wasn't fair to you." I stared at her. Was this an apology? From Victoria? The woman who treated "I'm sorry" like a sign of weakness? "I don't want you to leave," she said. And for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been genuine emotion. "I know I'm not always easy to live with. I know I prioritize work. But Daniel, we built this life together. 8 years. That has to mean something." Does it? The question came out before I could stop it. Because most of the time, Victoria, it feels like you built a life, and I'm just living in it. Your house, your schedule, your rules, your world. Where do I fit in any of it? "You fit everywhere," she said, reaching out to touch my knee, a gesture so rare it felt almost alien. "You're my husband. You're my partner. Am I? Or am I just the person who happens to be married to you?" She withdrew her hand, and I watched her expression shift, the momentary vulnerability replaced by something harder, more calculated. "What do you want from me, Daniel? Do you want me to quit my job? Abandon everything I've built? Become some 1,950 seconds housewife who lives for your approval? I want you to see me," I said quietly. "I want you to look at me like I'm a person you chose, not a burden you're managing. I want to feel like I matter to you beyond what I represent at company functions. You matter. Say my name." She blinked. "What?" "Say my name. Not honey, or babe, or my husband. My actual name. When was the last time you said my name?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Victoria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "That's ridiculous. Of course I say your name. When? Say it now." "Daniel." She stopped, realizing she'd been trapped into proving my point. "This is childish." Maybe, but it's also true. I set down the wine glass I'd been clutching. "I'm taking the job in Seattle. I've already accepted." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Victoria stood up slowly, her wine glass dangling from her fingers, and I watched her face transform from attempted vulnerability back into the cold executive I knew so well. "You already accepted, without discussing it with me." "I tried to discuss it last night. You told me I'd come crawling back. I was angry. You were honest." I stood up too, facing her across the coffee table that probably cost more than most people's cars. "You said what you really think, that I'm nothing without you. That leaving you would be the biggest mistake of my life. And maybe you're right. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe Seattle will be a disaster, and I'll realize I gave up a comfortable life for nothing. Then why? Because comfortable isn't the same as happy, Victoria, and I can't remember the last time I was happy. She stared at me, and I saw her cycling through responses, calculating which approach would work, which words would bring me back in line. This was what she did. She found weaknesses and exploited them, found pressure points and applied exactly enough force to get what she wanted. But I was done being managed. "When do you leave?" she asked finally, her voice flat. 2 weeks. They're covering relocation costs. I'll pack my things this weekend." Just like that. 8 years of marriage and you're walking away. I'm not walking away from the marriage, Victoria. I'm walking toward something better. There's a difference. Is there? She drained her wine glass in one long swallow and set it down with a sharp click against the table. "Fine, go. Run away to Seattle and play director at your little school. But don't expect me to wait around while you have your crisis. And don't," she moved closer, her eyes hard and bright, "don't expect me to take you back when you realize what a mistake you've made." "I'm not expecting anything from you anymore," I said, and meant it. That's kind of the point. She laughed, that cold, brittle sound I'd come to associate with her worst moods. "You really think you're going to make it out there on your own? You, who can't even pick out your own clothes without my input? You'll be lost in a month." "Maybe, but I'd rather be lost and looking than found and miserable." Something flickered across her face, hurt, maybe, or anger, or some emotion she'd never learned to name. "Get out of my sight," she said quietly. "Your sight? This is my house too, Victoria." "Is it? Check the deed, Daniel. My name, my money, my house." She turned and walked toward the stairs, her footsteps sharp and angry against the hardwood. "You want to leave?" "Leave? But don't pretend you contributed anything to this life. You were just along for the ride." She disappeared up the stairs, and a moment later, I heard her bedroom door slam the master bedroom that had once been ours, and had gradually, imperceptibly, become solely hers. I stood alone in the living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and expensive art and the expensive fragments of an expensive life, and felt something inside me finally, fully break free. It should have hurt more. The ending of a marriage should feel like amputation, like tearing away part of yourself. But instead, I felt light, lighter than I had in years. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, finding Sarah Chen's message about onboarding. I hit reply and typed, "Sarah, I can start in 2 weeks. Looking forward to this new chapter. Daniel, send." The whoosh of the email felt like opening a window in a room that had been sealed shut for too long. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of rain starting again, softer this time, gentler, like a promise. The cardboard boxes arrived on Thursday. I'd ordered them from Amazon, 20 medium-sized moving boxes with fragile printed on the sides, even though nothing I owned was particularly fragile anymore. You couldn't break what was already shattered. I stacked them in the spare bedroom that had become my sanctuary, these brown symbols of ending and beginning, and stared at them like they might tell me what came next. They didn't. They just sat there, empty and waiting, patient as the future. Victoria hadn't spoken to me in 3 days. She left before I woke up and came home after I was already asleep, or pretending to be asleep, lying in that narrow futon with my eyes closed and my heart hammering, listening to her heels click past my door without pausing. We communicated through text messages that read like business correspondence. "Using your car Tuesday. Mine's in the shop. Fine. Need you to sign tax documents. On kitchen counter. Done." No emotion, no pleading, no last-ditch attempts to make me stay. Part of me had expected a fight, the kind of dramatic confrontation you see in movies where someone breaks down and admits they've been wrong, where love conquers all and people choose each other over pride. But this was real life, and Victoria was nothing if not pragmatic. She'd already written me off in whatever mental spreadsheet she kept of assets and liabilities. I'd moved from one column to the other, and she was cutting her losses. Maybe that should have hurt more than it did. I started with books. Isn't that what they say, that you can tell everything about a person by their bookshelf? Mine was an odd collection of physics textbooks and science fiction novels, philosophy paperbacks with cracked spines, and teaching manuals I'd bought with good intentions and never quite finished. I wrapped each one in newspaper, the physical kind that Victoria never read anymore, preferring her news curated and delivered via apps, and settled them into boxes like I was packing away versions of myself. Here was the Carl Sagan that had made me want to teach in the first place. Here was the dog-eared copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance that I'd carried through college. Here was my thesis from graduate school, back when I'd thought I might be a researcher, might do something important in the world of theoretical physics. That was before I met Victoria. Before her ambition had been so dazzling, I'd mistaken proximity to her light for having light of my own. I was taping up the third box when Marcus showed up unannounced, holding a six-pack of beer and wearing the expression of someone who'd come to either talk me out of something or help me through it. "Thought you might need backup," he said, holding up the beer like a peace offering. "It's 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Also, you're packing up your entire life. I think that warrants day drinking." He walked past me into the spare bedroom, surveying the boxes and the half-dismantled bookshelf and the clothes piled on the futon. "Jesus, this is really happening. This is really happening." He handed me a beer, and we sat on the floor among the boxes, our backs against the wall, like we were college students again, instead of men in our late 30s having a midlife reckoning. "You could still change your mind," Marcus said, but there was no conviction in it. He was saying it because someone had to say it, because that's what friends do when other friends make dramatic life choices. "I don't want to change my mind." "Victoria's pretty pissed." I looked at him sharply. "Did she call you?" "She came by the school yesterday. Asked me if I knew where your sudden crises was coming from." He took a long pull of his beer. Used those exact words. "Sudden crisis. Like you woke up one day and decided to blow up your life for no reason." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that you've been unhappy for years, and she was too busy building her empire to notice." He paused. "She didn't take it well. I can imagine. She said, 'You're making a huge mistake, that Seattle will chew you up and spit you out, that you're running away instead of dealing with your problems.'" Marcus studied me over the rim of his beer bottle. "For what it's worth, I don't think that's true. I think you're running towards something. Big difference. That's what I keep telling myself." We drank in companionable silence for a while, and I felt grateful for Marcus in a way I hadn't felt grateful for much of anything lately. He wasn't judging me, wasn't trying to fix me or talk me out of it or convince me I was being irrational. He was just here, sitting on the floor of my spare bedroom, helping me pack away a life I no longer wanted. "You scared?" he asked after a while. "Terrified." End quote. Good. Means it matters. He crushed his empty beer can with one hand, a party trick from college that had never stopped being satisfying. "You know what I remember? When you first started dating Victoria, you were so goddamn happy. Couldn't shut up about her. She's brilliant. She's ambitious. She's going to change the world. You looked at her like she hung the moon." I remember. What happened? And it is a lawn. Down and on. I thought about that, really thought about it. When had things changed? There wasn't one moment, one fight, one betrayal. It was erosion, slow and steady, like water wearing away stone. 1,000 small dismissals, 1,000 casual cruelties disguised as honesty, 1,000 moments of choosing work over us, success over connection, image over authenticity. "She started treating me like an employee," I said finally. "Like someone she'd hired to play the role of husband and kept around because firing me would be inconvenient. And I let her. That's the worst part, Marcus. I just let it happen. Stood there and took it and convinced myself that this was what marriage looked like, that this was the price of being with someone extraordinary. You know that's bullshit, right? Marriage isn't supposed to make you smaller. I know that now." He reached over and squeezed my shoulder, a brief moment of contact that somehow said everything words couldn't. "Seattle's lucky to have you, man. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to be great." "Thanks," I said, and meant it more than he could possibly know. After Marcus left, I kept packing. Clothes, most of them off the rack, and wrinkled. Nothing like the designer pieces Victoria wore, like armor. Kitchen items I'd bought before we married, and she'd never bothered replacing with expensive versions. My laptop, old and slow, but mine. Photo albums from before Victoria, before the big house, before I'd lost myself in someone else's story. I found our wedding album buried in the back of a closet, gathering dust like Victoria had already relegated it to history. I sat on the floor and flipped through it slowly, studying the faces of two people who looked young and hopeful and convinced they had it all figured out. Victoria, in her Vera Wang dress, 29 years old and already VP of Product Development at her first startup. Me, in my rented tux, newly graduated with my teaching certificate, still believing that love conquered all. We looked happy. We'd been happy, I think, in that moment before real life set in. There was a photo of us dancing, her head on my shoulder, my hand at the small of her back, both of us laughing at something her uncle had said. I tried to remember what that felt like, being close to her, being chosen by her, believing that I was enough. I couldn't. The memory was there, but the feeling was gone, like trying to remember pain after it's passed. You know it happened, but you can't quite access it anymore. I closed the album and added it to her pile, the growing stack of things that belonged to this house, to this life, to this version of us that was ending. She could keep the wedding album. I was taking the future instead. Friday morning, I walked into Principal Henderson's office and handed him my resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice, professional and apologetic, thanking him for the opportunity and recommending Marcus as my replacement for advanced physics. Henderson read it twice, his bushy eyebrows climbing higher with each pass. "Seattle," he said finally. "You're moving to Seattle." "Yes, sir." "This about Victoria?" The directness surprised me. Henderson wasn't one for personal questions, preferring to maintain a careful distance between himself and his staff's private lives. "It's about a lot of things, but yes, partially." He nodded slowly, setting down my letter and lacing his fingers together on his desk. "I've been doing this job for 27 years, Cooper. You know what I've learned? Life's too short to spend it proving something to someone who's never going to see you clearly." He paused. "Your wife's a brilliant woman. Everyone knows that. But brilliance doesn't make someone a good partner." "No," I agreed quietly. "It doesn't. You're a hell of a teacher. Those kids love you, even when they're pretending not to. And that Seattle Academy," he smiled slightly, "they're getting someone special. I hope they know that." The words caught in my throat. I hadn't expected validation. Hadn't expected anything except maybe disappointment or irritation at the inconvenience of my departure. "Thank you," I managed. "Go build something worth building," Henderson said, standing to shake my hand. "And Cooper, don't look back. People who look back usually end up going back, and that'd be a damn shame." My last day of teaching fell on a Wednesday. Rainy. Naturally seemed like every significant moment in my life lately was accompanied by rain. Like the universe had a flair for obvious metaphor. I'd told my students earlier in the week, keeping it simple. New opportunity, new city, time for a change. They'd taken it better than I expected, though Jamal Thomas, the kid who'd finally grasped angular momentum, had looked stricken. "But Mr. Cooper, you're like the only teacher who actually explains things in a way that makes sense. Mr. Patterson will be taking over," I'd assured him. Mr. Patterson is great. Better than me, probably." "Doubt it," Jamal had muttered, and I'd had to turn away before he saw how much that simple statement meant to me. For my last class, I abandoned the curriculum. We talked instead about physics in real life, roller coasters and satellites, and why ice is slippery. They asked questions, real questions, the kind that came from genuine curiosity rather than the need to pass a test. And for an hour, I remembered why I'd wanted to teach in the first place. Because this mattered. These kids mattered. Helping them understand the world, showing them that physics wasn't just equations, but the fundamental poetry of existence that mattered. Victoria had never understood that. To her, teaching was a failure of ambition, a settling for less than I could be. But sitting in that classroom, watching these teenagers light up as we talked about the mechanics of a curveball, I knew she was wrong. This was enough. More than enough. When the bell rang for the last time, they surprised me with cards handmade, things covered in terrible physics puns, and genuine good wishes. Sophia Martinez, who wanted to be an aerospace engineer, had written, "Thanks for teaching us that the universe follows rules, makes it less scary." I hugged them goodbye. These kids I'd known for a year or 2 years, or in some cases, had watched grow from freshmen into almost adults, and felt pieces of my heart scatter across the room like light through a prism. Marcus walked me to my car carrying a box of things from my classroom, a battered globe, some models of molecular structures, a coffee mug that said, "I'm here to science the shit out of this." "You good?" he asked. "I'm good." Liar. But he said it affectionately. "Call me when you get settled. And Cooper, don't be a stranger. Never." I drove home through the rain, past familiar streets and familiar landmarks, and felt the strange mixture of grief and relief that comes with closing chapters. This town had been my home for 12 years. I'd built a life here, had students and colleagues and routines. I knew which coffee shop had the best scones and which grocery store stocked my favorite brand of cereal. But it had never really been mine. It had been Victoria's town, Victoria's world, and I'd just been living in it. Seattle would be different. Seattle would be mine. The moving truck came on Saturday morning. 2 guys named Chris and Eduardo who worked with the efficient indifference of people who moved other people's lives for a living. They loaded boxes and furniture, making quick work of the physical remnants of my existence in this house. Victoria was gone, of course. She'd left Friday night for a business trip to San Francisco, though we both knew it was just an excuse to not be here for this, to not watch me leave, to not have to acknowledge that her certainty about me crawling back might be misplaced. I did a final walkthrough of the house after the truck was loaded. The spare bedroom looked smaller without my things in it, just a futon and empty bookshelves and dust patterns on the floor where boxes had been. The kitchen, gleaming and cold. The living room with its expensive furniture and expensive art, and the wine stain on the couch from a night 2 years ago when Victoria had gotten drunk and admitted she wasn't sure she'd ever wanted to get married. I'd laughed it off then, made excuses, convinced myself she hadn't meant it. But people tell the truth when they're drunk. That's what they say, isn't it? In vino veritas. I left my keys on the kitchen counter, house keys, car keys to the BMW she'd bought me for our 5th anniversary, even though I'd said I liked my Honda just fine. The BMW was hers too, really. Everything here was hers. I was just taking back what had always been mine. Myself. The flight to Seattle left at 3. I had time. I drove to the ocean instead, to a beach I'd discovered years ago before Victoria, back when I used to do things like drive to the ocean just to think. The sand was gray, and the water was gray, and the sky was gray, everything rendered in watercolor shades of melancholy. I walked along the shore, letting the wind whip around me, and thought about all the versions of myself I'd been. The physics student who believed he'd change the world, the new teacher full of idealism, the man who fell in love with brilliance and ambition, the husband who shrank himself to fit someone else's expectations. And now, the man walking away, the man choosing himself. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Hi Daniel, it's Sarah Chen. Just wanted to wish you safe travels. We're all excited to meet you on Monday. The team has big plans." I typed back, "Thank you, looking forward to it." Another buzz. This one from Victoria. "I assume you're gone. House keys better be where I can find them. Also, the lawyers will be sending paperwork. Sign it promptly." No goodbye, no good luck, no acknowledgement that 8 years of marriage were ending, that we'd promised forever and were settling for finite. Just logistics. Just another business transaction to be handled efficiently. I almost didn't respond. Almost just pocketed the phone and let her wonder. But I'd spent enough years wondering what she thought, what she wanted, whether I measured up. Time to be done with that. I typed, "Keys on the counter. I hope you find what you're looking for, Victoria. I hope it makes you happy." I didn't wait for a response. I turned off my phone, put it in my pocket, and watched the waves crash against the shore patient. persistent, wearing away stone, with nothing but time and repetition. I could be patient too. I could persist. Behind me, the sun was breaking through clouds, casting light across the water in shafts that looked almost holy. A sign, maybe, or just weather. Sometimes the universe gave you metaphors, and sometimes it just gave you atmospheric conditions, and you had to decide which was which. I chose metaphor. I chose hope. I got back in my Honda, the one with the sticky door and temperamental AC, and drove to the airport. There was a whole country between Connecticut and Seattle, between who I'd been and who I might become. Time to cross it. Seattle greeted me with rain. Of course it did. The universe had committed to this meteorological theme and wasn't backing down now. But it was different rain than Connecticut rain, softer somehow, more persistent, the kind that settled in for the long haul rather than arriving in dramatic bursts. It felt honest, this rain. No pretense, no performance, just water falling from sky to earth, because that's what water does. I could work with honest. The apartment I'd rented, sight unseen, sat in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood that the real estate agent had described as eclectic. In that way, real estate agents use eclectic to mean you'll either love it or hate it. 3 rooms on the second floor of a tenant estate. Converted house, hardwood floors that creaked, windows that looked out onto a street lined with coffee shops and vintage stores, and murals of people I didn't recognize, but who seemed important. It was nothing like the house in Connecticut. Nothing like the sleek modern showcase with its designer furniture and its cathedral ceilings and its carefully curated art that Victoria had chosen without my input. This place was mine, all mine, and it was perfect. The moving truck wouldn't arrive until Tuesday, so I spent the weekend sleeping on an air mattress I'd bought at Target and eating takeout from restaurants I found by walking until something looked good. No plan, no itinerary, no schedule dictated by someone else's needs. Just me and a city I didn't know, and the strange, terrifying freedom of having no one to answer to. Saturday night, I walked down to Pike Place Market just as the vendors were closing up. The air smelled like fish and flowers and coffee, this odd combination that somehow made sense. Street musicians played on corners, a guy with a guitar, a woman with a violin, a group doing something percussive with overturned buckets. I threw dollar bills into open cases and listened, really listened, in a way I hadn't listened to anything in years. When was the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to? Not because it was productive or because it impressed someone or because it fit into someone else's vision of how life should be lived, but just because it felt good? I couldn't remember. I found a bar dark and worn and comfortable and ordered a whiskey. The bartender, a woman with purple hair and a nose ring, set it down with a smile that reached her eyes. New in town? Is it that obvious? You've got the look. That mixture of terrified and excited. We get a lot of that here. She wiped down the bar with practiced efficiency. What brings you to Seattle? New job. Fresh start. Running away from my life. All the best reasons. She laughed genuine and warm. I'm Sam, by the way. And just so you know, you picked the right city for reinvention. Seattle specializes in second acts. We talked for a while. The easy conversation of strangers who know they'll probably never see each other again and can therefore be honest. I told her about teaching, about the new position at Seattle Tech Academy, about wanting to do something that mattered. I didn't mention Victoria. Didn't mention the marriage that was ending, or the woman who'd spent 8 years convincing me I was less than I was. That was old story. Old Daniel, the one I was leaving behind. Sam poured me another whiskey on the house, for luck, and I drank it slowly, watching the rain through the bar's window and feeling something unfamiliar settling into my chest. Peace, maybe, or the beginning of it. Monday morning arrived too fast and too bright. I woke up on my air mattress to sunlight streaming through uncurtained windows. Apparently Seattle did have sun, who knew? And the reality of what came next crashed over me like a wave. First day. New job. New life. No pressure. I showered in a bathroom that wasn't marble and intimidating, dressed in clothes I'd chosen myself from a suitcase, and took the bus to Seattle Tech Academy because I didn't have a car here yet, and honestly, I liked the idea of public transportation. Liked being part of the crowd, anonymous and ordinary. The academy sat in South Lake Union, a gleaming building that looked like someone had crossed a startup office with a university campus. Glass and steel and open spaces. Students walking around with laptops and tablets. The buzz of innovation in the air like electricity. Sarah Chen met me in the lobby. She was smaller than I'd expected from our video calls, maybe 5'2" in heels, with short black hair and the kind of energy that made you want to keep up or get left behind. "Daniel." She shook my hand with both of hers, her smile bright and genuine. "You made it. How was the move? How's the apartment? Are you settling in okay?" "Good. Fine. Getting there," I answered, slightly overwhelmed by the enthusiasm directed at me. "Thanks for everything, really. This opportunity." "Stop. We're thrilled to have you." She gestured for me to follow and started walking, talking over her shoulder at a pace that suggested she didn't know how to slow down. "I want to show you the campus, introduce you to the team, get you set up with your office. Yes, you get an office, not a cubicle. You're a director now. And then we have lunch with the curriculum team at noon. Sound good?" "Sounds great." She wasn't lying about the office. It was small but bright, with windows overlooking the city and a desk that hadn't been inherited from 6 previous occupants. My name was already on the door, Dr. Daniel Cooper, Director of STEM Curriculum, and seeing it printed there in clean, professional letters made something tighten in my throat. This was real. This was mine. "I know it's not much," Sarah was saying, "but we thought you'd want to personalize it yourself, make it yours, you know? Bring in plants or photos or whatever makes you feel at home." She paused, studying me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You okay? You look a little overwhelmed." "I'm good. Just, it's a lot. Good lot, but a lot." She nodded, understanding more than I'd said. "Listen, I'm going to be straight with you, because that's how I operate. We brought you here because we think you're brilliant. Your work on integrated STEM learning, the way you approach physics education, the results you got at Henderson, that's exactly what we need. But more than that?" She leaned against the doorframe, her expression earnest. "We need someone who actually cares about the kids, who sees them as people, not data points. You do that. We could tell from your interviews, from talking to your references. So, yeah, this is going to be challenging. Big budget, big expectations, big everything. But we believe in you." "Now you just need to believe in yourself." I swallowed hard. "Working on it." "Good. Keep working." She pushed off the doorframe and grinned. "Now come on. I want you to meet Marcus. No, not your Marcus, our Marcus, who runs the robotics program and will definitely try to poach you for some kind of interdepartmental project. Fair warning, he's relentless." The morning blurred into a series of introductions and handshakes and names I'd forget and have to relearn. Everyone was friendly, enthusiastic, younger than me by at least 5 years, and seemingly unburdened by the cynicism that usually accumulated in educational institutions. They asked about my vision for the curriculum, about my teaching philosophy, about whether I'd tried the tacos from the food truck on 3rd Street. I hadn't, but apparently it was a crime against humanity that needed immediate rectification. No one asked about my personal life. No one mentioned a spouse or seemed to expect one. I was just Daniel here, not Victoria Ashford's husband, not someone's +1, not a disappointing accessory to someone else's success. Just Daniel, Director of STEM Curriculum, educator, human being standing on his own 2 feet. I could get used to this. The first week passed in a blur of meetings and curriculum reviews and strategic planning sessions. The work was intense but good, the kind of challenging that made you sharper rather than the kind that wore you down to nothing. I rewrote 3 courses, proposed a new approach to physics education that got actual excitement from the team, and started building something that felt important. At night, I'd go back to my apartment, still mostly empty, waiting for the moving truck that had been delayed, and order takeout and sit on my air mattress, looking out the window at the city. I didn't know yet, but was learning to navigate. I didn't think about Victoria as much as I expected to. When I did, it was with a kind of distant curiosity, like remembering a person you used to be rather than someone you used to love. She'd texted twice, once about the divorce papers, sign and return as soon as possible, and once about a credit card bill I needed to handle. No personal questions. No, "How are you?" or "Are you okay?" or any acknowledgement that we'd spent 8 years of our lives together. Maybe that said everything that needed saying. On Friday afternoon, I was deep in revisions to the advanced placement physics curriculum when Sarah knocked on my office door. "Got a minute?" "Sure, come in." She settled into the chair across from my desk, and I noticed she looked tired, the kind of tired that came from caring too much about too many things. "How's your first week been?" Honest answer. "Honestly, great. Overwhelming, but great. This place, it's different, in a good way." "Yeah, we try." She smiled, but there was something else in her expression, something careful. "Listen, I wanted to check in with you about something personal, and if I'm overstepping, just tell me to back off." My stomach tightened. "Okay. I noticed you don't wear a wedding ring, and your emergency contact form just lists your parents, no spouse, and look, it's absolutely none of my business. Your personal life is your personal life, but I wanted to make sure you're doing okay. Big moves can be hard, and if you're going through something difficult, we have resources, employee assistance, counseling, that kind of thing." I looked down at my left hand, at the pale band of skin where a ring had been for 8 years until I'd taken it off on the plane from Connecticut. Funny how something so small could leave such a visible mark. "I'm separated," I said, the word tasting new and strange in my mouth. "Divorcing, actually. It's recent and messy, but I'm okay." "Okay," Sarah said carefully. "And the move here was that?" "Part of it, yeah. I needed distance, needed to figure out who I was without time-miss. I stopped realizing I was about to trauma dump on my boss during my first week. Sorry, that's probably more than you wanted to know." "Don't apologize. And for what it's worth, I think getting distance from something that wasn't working is brave, not weak. Takes guts to start over." She stood up, heading for the door, then paused. "There's a thing tonight. Nothing formal, just the team going out for drinks and karaoke. You should come. Might be good to blow off some steam, meet people outside the office context." I don't really sing. Neither does Marcus, but that doesn't stop him from murdering Journey songs every Friday. Come on, new guy. It'll be fun. Plus, there's tacos first. Remember? The food truck we discussed? Crime against humanity? I laughed, despite myself. "When you put it that way. Great, we're meeting at 6. I'll text you the address." After she left, I sat for a moment in my quiet office, looking out at the Seattle skyline and thinking about this version of myself, the one who went out for tacos and karaoke, the one who was making friends and building a life and not waiting for permission to exist. I liked him, this new Daniel, or maybe old Daniel, the one I'd been before. Victoria convinced me that being ordinary was the same as being insufficient. My phone buzzed, not Sarah with the address, instead, a text from Victoria. "Lawyers sent the papers. Don't drag this out. I want it finalized by end of quarter." End of quarter. Like our marriage was a financial deadline, a box to check before the fiscal year ended. I typed back, "I'll sign them this weekend." Then, after a pause, "I hope you're well." She didn't respond. I hadn't expected her to. The karaoke bar was loud and dark and full of people who were determinedly bad at singing and having an excellent time doing it. The curriculum team had claimed a corner booth, and someone, Marcus, not my Marcus, this Marcus, who was indeed relentless, had already ordered enough food to feed a small army. "Daniel, you came." He waved me over like we'd been friends for years, instead of colleagues for 5 days. "Sit, eat, prepare to have your musical taste destroyed by Sarah's Dolly Parton obsession." "It's not an obsession, it's appreciation," Sarah protested, but she was laughing. "Dolly is a national treasure." I slid into the booth and let the noise wash over me, people talking over each other, laughing at terrible jokes, arguing good-naturedly about song choices. It felt easy, natural, like I'd always been part of this group instead of the new guy trying to figure out where he fit. Someone handed me a beer. Someone else loaded tacos onto my plate. Trust me, get the al pastor, it'll change your life. And gradually, without really noticing it happening, I started to relax. Started to be present. Started to feel like maybe, possibly, I could build something here that wasn't haunted by everything I'd left behind. We ate tacos. They were, in fact, life-changing. We watched Marcus absolutely massacre Don't Stop Believin'. Sarah hadn't lied. And, eventually, emboldened by beer and good company, I let them talk me into singing The Scientist by Coldplay, my voice shaky but earnest. The lyrics about going back to the start hitting differently now that I was literally starting over. When I finished, they applauded like I'd performed at Carnegie Hall, and I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been locked tight for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to have it open. Joy, maybe, or possibility, or just the simple pleasure of being seen and accepted for exactly who I was. "Not bad, Cooper," Sarah said, raising her beer in salute. "Not bad at all." I took the bus home around midnight, slightly drunk and entirely content, watching the city blur past the windows. My phone buzzed, probably Marcus, sending a follow-up joke, or Sarah sharing photos from the evening. But it wasn't either of them. Unknown number. Local area code. "Hi, Daniel. You don't know me, but I think we need to talk. It's about your wife. Can we meet?" I stared at the text, the pleasant buzz of the evening evaporating like steam. About Victoria? Who was this? Why would someone in Seattle be contacting me about Victoria? I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared immediately, like they'd been waiting for my response. "My name is Elena. I worked at Meridian Global. I have information I think you should know. Information about Victoria. Please. It's important." My hands were shaking. Information about Victoria. What kind of information? What could some random employee possibly need to tell me that was so urgent they'd track down my number? "How did you get my number?" "That's not important right now. What's important is that Victoria isn't who you think she is. Can we meet? Tomorrow? There's a coffee shop on Pike Street. Urban Grind. 10 a.m.? I should have said no. Should have blocked the number and forgotten about it. I'd left Connecticut, left Victoria, left that entire life behind. Whatever this Elena person thought I needed to know, it was part of a story I'd already closed. But something in the urgency of those messages, the way they'd found me across the country within weeks of my arrival, the careful phrasing information I think you should know, made me pause. What if Victoria had done something? What if there was something about our marriage, about her, that I'd missed? What if I'd only seen half the picture? I typed, "I'll be there." The response came immediately. "Thank you. Trust me. You need to hear this." I sat on the bus with my phone in my hands, watching the city lights streak past, and felt the careful peace I'd been building start to fracture at the edges. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Urban Grind. A woman I'd never met was going to tell me something about the woman I'd been married to for 8 years. And somehow, I knew it was going to change everything. I didn't sleep. How could I? I lay on my air mattress listening to Seattle's nighttime sounds, sirens in the distance, someone laughing on the street below, the perpetual whisper of rain that had started again around 2 a.m. and replayed those text messages over and over until the words lost meaning and became just shapes, just anxiety given digital form. Information about Victoria. She isn't who you think she is. You need to hear this. What could this Elena person possibly know? What could be so important that she'd tracked me down across the country, found my number somehow, couldn't wait even a week before demanding a meeting? Part of me, the rational physicist, part that believed in evidence and observable phenomena, said this was probably nothing. A disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. Someone who'd been fired and wanted to cause trouble. Maybe even a scam of some kind. People did stranger things. But another part of me, the part that had spent 8 years married to Victoria, that had watched her operate with surgical precision in every aspect of her life, that had seen the way she could smile at someone while simultaneously calculating how to destroy them, that part whispered that maybe, just maybe, there were things about my wife I'd never known. Ex-wife, almost ex-wife, the woman I'd left behind. At 5:30, I gave up on sleep entirely. I made coffee in the cheap French press I'd bought at Target, stood at my window watching the city wake up, and tried to prepare myself for whatever was coming. The problem was, you can't prepare for the unknown. That's what made it unknown. Urban Grind sat on a corner in Capitol Hill, the kind of coffee shop that looked like it had been assembled from reclaimed materials and good intentions. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, local art on the walls that ranged from brilliant to aggressively incomprehensible. The smell of espresso and fresh pastries hit me as soon as I walked in, and under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the cozy atmosphere. Under these circumstances, I just felt sick. I ordered a coffee I didn't want and claimed a table in the back corner, positioning myself so I could see the door. Old habit from years of arriving early to faculty meetings, always wanting the strategic position, as if seeing people enter gave you some kind of control over what happened next. She arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. I knew it was her immediately, even though I'd never seen her before. She had that look nervous energy barely contained, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me with recognition that shouldn't have been possible since we'd never met. But somehow she knew me too. Maybe Victoria had photos around the office. Maybe she'd done research. Maybe I just looked like exactly what I was, a man waiting to have his world turned upside down. Elena was younger than I expected, late 20s, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled into a professional ponytail, and the kind of outfit that suggested she'd come straight from somewhere important. She carried a leather messenger bag that looked expensive, but worn, well used rather than decorative. She walked to my table without hesitation. Daniel? Elena. We shook hands. Hers was cold, trembling slightly, and she sat down across from me, setting her bag carefully on the chair beside her like it contained something precious or dangerous, maybe both. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I know this must seem crazy. I know you probably think I'm some kind of stalker or... I think I need you to tell me who you are and what this is about," I interrupted, not unkindly, but firmly. "You said you have information about Victoria, about my wife." "Your ex-wife," she corrected gently. "I know you're separated. I know you moved here 2 weeks ago. I know." She stopped, seeing my expression. "I'm sorry. That sounds creepy. I'm not stalking you, I promise. I needed to know enough to find you, to talk to you before." She broke off again, looking around the coffee shop like she was checking for surveillance. "Before what?" She took a breath, centering herself, and when she looked at me again, her eyes were clear and determined. "Before she finds out I talked to you, before she can spin this, or bury it, or make me disappear the way she's made other people disappear." The words hung in the air between us, dramatic and impossible, and somehow terrifying in their specificity. "Elena," I said carefully, "I need you to start from the beginning. Who are you? How do you know Victoria?" "I was her assistant, executive assistant at Meridian Global. I worked directly for her for 3 years. She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo, her and Victoria standing in what looked like a conference room. Victoria, with that professional smile she wore like armor. Elena looking proud and young, and like she believed she was part of something important. That was taken 18 months ago, right after the Series C funding round, before I understood what kind of person she really was. I studied the photo, this glimpse into a part of Victoria's life I'd never really seen. She looked exactly like herself, polished, powerful, in control. But there was something in the way she stood, the way her hand rested on Elena's shoulder, that felt proprietary, possessive. "What happened?" I started noticing things. Elena put her phone away, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her coffee. Small things at first. Discrepancies in reports. Meetings that weren't logged. Phone calls she'd taken private and then claimed never happened. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was missing context. She was the CEO, right? She had access to information. I didn't. She operated at a level I couldn't fully understand. But then I started finding evidence, real evidence, of things that weren't just questionable business practices, but actual crimes. She leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. Daniel, your wife has been embezzling money from Meridian Global for at least 5 years. Millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions. She's been using shell companies and offshore accounts and creative accounting to siphon funds out of the company she built. The coffee shop seemed to tilt slightly, the ground becoming uncertain beneath me. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. I have proof. She patted her messenger bag. Emails, financial statements, wire transfer records. I've been collecting evidence for 8 months, ever since I figured out what she was doing. Why? The question came out harsher than I intended. Why would Victoria embezzle from her own company? She's a billionaire. The company's worth billions. Why would she risk everything to steal from herself? Elena laughed a bitter, brittle sound that reminded me uncomfortably of Victoria. That's what I couldn't figure out at first. But then I started digging deeper. Daniel, Victoria isn't just wealthy on paper. She's wealthy in reality. She owns properties all over the world that aren't connected to Meridian. She has bank accounts in the Caymans, in Switzerland, in places I'd never even heard of. She's been building a second empire, completely separate from the public-facing one, and she's been doing it with money that doesn't belong to her. I felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be the woman I'd married, the woman I'd lived with for 8 years. Victoria was ambitious, yes. Ruthless in business, absolutely. But a criminal? A thief? You could be lying, I said, but even as the words came out, I knew they sounded weak. You could have fabricated all of this, photoshopped documents, created fake emails. I could have, Elena agreed. That's why I'm going to show you everything, every piece of evidence I have. And then you can decide whether I'm lying or whether your wife has been lying to you for your entire marriage. She pulled her laptop from her messenger bag, opened it, and turned it to face me. The screen showed a spreadsheet, columns of numbers and dates and account codes that meant nothing to me at first glance, but which Elena clearly understood intimately. This is Meridian's operating budget for Q2 of last year, she explained, her finger tracing across the screen. See this line item? Consulting fees, external contractors, $50 million. Now look at this. She opened another window showing what looked like bank statements. That money went to a company called Apex Solutions Group. Sounds legitimate, right? Except Apex doesn't exist. It's a shell company, registered in Delaware, no employees, no office, no actual business operations. It exists purely to receive money from Meridian. And you're saying Victoria controls this shell company? I'm saying Victoria is this shell company. Look at the signature on the incorporation documents. She pulled up another file, a PDF of corporate paperwork, and there, halfway down the page, was a signature I recognized immediately. Not Victoria's usual precise, controlled signature, but close enough that I could see it was hers. My hands were numb. There could be explanations, legitimate reasons. There are 37 of these companies, Daniel. 37 different shells, all moving money out of Meridian into accounts Victoria controls. Over the last 5 years, she's diverted at least $200 million, maybe more. I'm still finding new accounts, new trails, $200 million. The number was so large it became abstract, meaningless. How could someone steal $200 million? How could you even spend that much money? What did you do with wealth that excessive? Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why not go to the police, the FBI, the board of directors? Elena's expression hardened. Because I tried. 3 months ago, I compiled everything I had and took it to the board. Presented it in a closed session. showed them the evidence, explained exactly what was happening. She paused, and I saw pain flicker across her face. 2 days later, I was fired. Victoria claimed I'd been stealing from the company, had fabricated evidence to cover my own crimes. She had documents, fake documents, but convincing ones showing that I'd been embezzling. My accounts were frozen. I was investigated. I lost everything. But if you're innocent, innocent doesn't matter when someone like Victoria decides to destroy you. She has lawyers, Daniel. The best lawyers. She has connections. She has enough money to make any problem disappear, including me. Elena's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back angrily. I spent my entire savings defending myself. Lost my apartment. Had to move back in with my parents at 29 years old. And the whole time, Victoria just kept operating like nothing happened. Kept running Meridian, kept stealing, kept being the brilliant CEO everyone admired. I thought about Victoria, about the house that was too expensive, the lifestyle that seemed excessive even for a CEO, about the way she'd always been vague when I asked about finances, always dismissive when I suggested maybe we didn't need the newest luxury car or the vacation home in Aspen. "You're divorced now," I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "Or divorcing. You said you moved here to get away from her. That's why I tracked you down. Because you're the only person who might actually listen. You're the only person she doesn't have complete control over anymore. What do you want from me?" "Help," Elena said simply. "I'm going to the FBI next week. I'm going to show them everything I have. But I need more than just financial records. I need someone who knows her, who can speak to her character, who can explain how she operates. She hesitated. "I need you to tell them about your marriage, about who she really is behind closed doors. My marriage is private. Your marriage is evidence." Elena's voice was urgent now, desperate. "Daniel, think about it. How did you live? How did she treat money? Did she talk about her work? Did she ever mention these companies, these accounts? Did she travel without explanation? Did she—" "Stop!" I held up a hand, my head spinning. This was too much, too fast. 8 years of my life were being reinterpreted through a lens I'd never considered. Every memory, every conversation, every moment, suddenly suspect. Had Victoria been a criminal the entire time? Had I been married to someone I never really knew? "I need time," I said. "I need to process this. I need to." "There isn't time." Elena pulled out a flash drive, set it on the table between us. "This is everything. All my evidence, all my research. Take it. Look at it. Verify it if you want. But Daniel, please, I'm running out of options here. If Victoria finds out I'm talking to you, if she figures out what I'm planning—" She stopped, fear naked on her face. "I don't think she'd actually hurt me physically, but she'd destroy me. She'd make sure I could never work again, never have a normal life again. She did it once. She'll do it again." I stared at the flash drive, small and silver and innocuous, containing information that could blow up whatever remained of my relationship with Victoria. Part of me wanted to push it back across the table, walk away, pretend this conversation never happened. I'd already left. I was already free. Why did I need to know this? Why did it matter? But another part of me, the part that had spent 8 years feeling small and dismissed and inadequate, wanted to know, needed to know. If Victoria had been lying about this, what else had she lied about? What else had I missed? I picked up the flash drive. "I'll look at it," I said, "but I'm not promising anything. If what you're saying is true, if she really did all this, then yes, I'll talk to the FBI. I'll tell them whatever I know. But I need to verify this first. I need to be sure." Relief flooded Elena's face. "Thank you. God, thank you. I know this is a lot. I know you probably think I'm crazy, but I promise you, everything on that drive is real. It's all documented. It's all true." She stood up, gathering her things with shaking hands. "I should go. The longer I stay, the more risk there is. But Daniel, be careful. Victoria is smart. Smarter than both of us. If she finds out you have that information, if she realizes you're helping me," she didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I'll be careful. After she left, I sat alone in the coffee shop holding the flash drive and trying to remember how to breathe. Around me, people ordered lattes and worked on laptops and chatted with friends, living normal lives where their marriages weren't complicated by accusations of embezzlement and corporate fraud. I envied them. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Great work this week. Drinks tonight to celebrate surviving your first week? Team's going to shelter at 8. Normal life. Normal job. Normal people who weren't connected to whatever twisted situation I'd just walked into. I could ignore the flash drive. Could throw it away, block Elena's number, pretend this morning never happened. I could build my new life here in Seattle and let Victoria's past, whatever it contained, remain in the past where it belonged. But even as I thought it, I knew I couldn't. Because if Elena was telling the truth, if Victoria really had been committing crimes on this scale, then our entire marriage had been a lie. Every conversation about money, every reassurance about our financial future, every dismissal of my concerns about her work, all of it built on fraud. I'd spent 8 years married to a stranger. Maybe it was time to figure out who that stranger really was. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket, finished my cold coffee, and walked out into the Seattle morning. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and bright and deceptively simple. Nothing was simple. Not anymore. Maybe it never had been. That night, after drinks with the team, where I smiled and laughed and pretended I wasn't carrying a flash drive full of evidence that my ex-wife was a criminal, I sat in my apartment with my laptop and the weight of decision pressing against my chest. All I had to do was plug it in, open the files, look at the evidence. All I had to do was confirm that the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd married, the woman I'd spent 8 years trying and failing to be enough for, was a fraud and a thief. Simple, easy, devastating. I plugged in the flash drive. The files opened like Pandora's box, and I started reading. By the time the sun came up, I knew 3 things for certain. 1. Elena was telling the truth. 2. Victoria had been stealing from her own company for years, and I'd been too blind, or too stupid, or too in love to see it. And 3. This was going to get much, much worse before it got better. My phone sat on the desk beside me, Victoria's last text still on the screen. Don't drag this out. Oh, Victoria, I thought. If only you knew what was coming. If only either of us did. The documents didn't lie. Numbers never did. That was what I'd always loved about physics, about mathematics, about the clean certainty of equations that balanced perfectly or didn't balance at all. No gray areas. No interpretation. Just truth, rendered in symbols and digits that couldn't be argued with. The flash drive contained truth. Page after page, file after file, spreadsheet after spreadsheet, all of it pointing to the same inescapable conclusion. Victoria Ashford, CEO of Meridian Global, brilliant businesswoman, Forbes list regular, my wife of 8 years, was a thief on a scale I could barely comprehend. I'd been reading for 6 hours straight. My eyes burned. My back ached from hunching over my laptop. My coffee had gone cold 3 times, reheated in the microwave, gone cold again. Outside my window, Seattle had cycled through rain and sun and back to rain, the city going about its business, while I sat in my nearly empty apartment, discovering that everything I'd thought I knew about my marriage was fiction. The shell companies alone were a masterwork of deception. 37 of them, like Elena had said, each with innocuous names that sounded vaguely corporate. Apex Solutions Group, Meridian Consulting Partners, Global Tech Advisors, Strategic Innovation Holdings. They existed on paper, had business licenses and tax ID numbers and bank accounts. They looked legitimate. They were designed to look legitimate. But they were ghosts. Phantoms conjured by Victoria to move money from one place to another, from Meridian's coffers into accounts she controlled. The consultants who never consulted. The contractors who never contracted. The advisory services that never advised. All of it was her. All of it was theft. I pulled up a file labeled Wire Transfers 2020 to 2024 and watched the numbers scroll past. 50,000 here, 200,000 there, occasional transfers of millions. Each one carefully documented by Elena, each one traced from Meridian's accounts to these shell companies, and then this was the damning part, to personal accounts in Victoria's name. Not even hidden, really, just buried deep enough that you'd have to know where to look. And who would look? Victoria was the CEO. She controlled the finances. She reported to a board that trusted her implicitly because she'd made them all rich. Why would anyone question the brilliant woman who'd grown Meridian from a scrappy startup into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise? Elena had questioned, and Elena had been destroyed for it. I opened a folder titled Personal Correspondence and found myself reading emails between Victoria and various lawyers, financial advisors, and what appeared to be offshore banking specialists. The tone was casual, almost breezy. Need to move another $5M this quarter. Use the Switzerland account, less scrutiny. Or, the Cayman property is perfect. Purchase under Strategic Innovation Holdings. No paper trail to Meridian. She wrote about stealing millions of dollars the way I wrote grocery lists. Casual, matter of fact, like it was perfectly normal to systematically loot your own company. There was a subfolder labeled Properties, and I clicked it with trembling hands, not sure I wanted to see what was inside, but unable to stop myself. A penthouse in Manhattan, a villa in Tuscany, a beach house in Malibu, an apartment in Hong Kong, a chateau outside Paris. Properties I'd never heard of, never seen, never knew existed. 7 million here, 12 million there. All purchased through shell companies. All hidden from public record. All bought with money that wasn't hers. I thought about our house in Connecticut, the one she'd bought without consulting me, the one I'd felt guilty for not appreciating enough. That had been purchased legitimately, through Meridian, above board and traceable. It was the facade, the acceptable face of wealth that everyone could see and admire. These others were the reality, the secret empire she'd built on fraud. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, my Marcus, back in Connecticut. How's Seattle treating you? Miss you at the faculty meetings, said. No one, ever. I typed back, good, different, lots to process, then deleted it and wrote instead, great, really, settling in. How are the kids? Asking about you every day. Jamal wants to know if Seattle has better physics teachers than Connecticut. I told him impossible. I smiled, despite everything. This small reminder of the life I'd left behind. The good parts. The parts that had nothing to do with Victoria and everything to do with the person I'd been before her, the person I was trying to become again. Another file caught my eye. Board meeting notes. Private. I opened it and found transcripts of board meetings going back 3 years. Not official minutes, these were Elena's personal notes. Observations she'd made while sitting in the back of the room, supposedly taking dictation, but actually documenting something else entirely. One entry from 18 months ago, VM Victoria Meridian Ashford, became agitated when David questioned Q3 consulting expenses. Shut down discussion immediately. Moved to new topic. Board didn't push back. They never do. She's trained them like dogs. Another from last year. Caught VM on phone in her office after hours. She didn't know I was still in building. Heard her telling someone to make sure the Singapore transfer clears before Friday. I don't want flags raised. She saw me in the doorway. Her expression changed completely from stressed to smiling in half a second. Asked what I was still doing here, told me to go home. It was like watching someone put on a mask. Elena had been documenting this for years, watching, recording, building a case, even before she fully understood what she was seeing. There was something almost tragic about it, this young woman who'd believed in her boss, admired her, wanted to be like her, slowly realizing that her hero was a criminal. I knew the feeling. The last file in the folder was a video, just labeled Evidence, Final. I hesitated before clicking it, my cursor hovering over the play button. Something about the name Final suggested this was important. Maybe the most important thing Elena had collected. I clicked play. The video was grainy, shot from a bad angle, clearly recorded on a phone held at waist level. The location was an office, Victoria's office, I realized, recognizing the view of downtown Boston through the windows. The camera was shaking slightly, and I could hear breathing, nervous and quick. Elena's voice, barely audible. March 15th, 2024. Recording evidence of. Then Victoria's voice, sharp and clear. Elena, are you recording this? The camera jerked, showed a glimpse of floor, then steadied. Now I could see both of them, Victoria behind her massive desk, Elena standing in front of it, her phone now openly visible, pointed at her boss. Yes. Elena's voice was defiant, scared. I'm recording this. I want documentation of what you're about to do. You're making a mistake. Victoria's tone was calm, almost gentle. The voice of someone explaining something obvious to a child. Put the phone away. Let's talk about this rationally. Rationally, you're firing me to cover up your crimes. What's rational about that? I'm firing you because you've been embezzling from this company. Victoria pulled out a folder, opened it, showed papers to the camera. I have evidence. Transfers to your personal accounts. Falsified expense reports. Forged signatures. You've been stealing from Meridian for at least 8 months. Those are fake. You fabricated those. I never. Can you prove that? Victoria leaned back in her chair, and I watched her transform into something cold and terrifying. This was the face I'd seen occasionally in our marriage, in moments when I'd pushed too hard or questioned too much. The face that said she was done pretending to be human. Think carefully, Elena. You're 29 years old, with a promising career ahead of you. Or you were. Right now, you have 2 choices. You can accept this severance package. She slid another folder across the desk, sign the NDA, and walk away. You'll get 6 months' salary, excellent references, and we never speak of this again. Or what? Or I turn this evidence over to the police. You'll be arrested, prosecuted, probably convicted. You'll go to prison, Elena. For something you didn't do, yes, but that won't matter. I have lawyers, very good lawyers. They've built an airtight case. By the time they're done, even you'll believe you're guilty. The silence stretched. I watched Elena's face in the shaky video, saw her cycling through emotions, rage, fear, desperation, defeat. She was trapped, and she knew it. Victoria had constructed a perfect frame, and Elena was standing inside it. You're a monster, Elena whispered. I'm practical. Victoria stood up, walked around the desk. I like you, Elena. I really do. You're smart, capable, you have potential. But you made the mistake of looking where you shouldn't have looked, and now we both have to deal with the consequences. I'll tell people. You'll do nothing. Victoria's voice hardened. Because if you do, if you try to expose me, I won't just destroy your career, I'll destroy you. Your parents, they own a small restaurant in Tacoma, don't they? How would they feel if the health department suddenly started finding violations? Your brother works in finance. How would he like to be investigated for insider trading? I can make problems appear in the lives of everyone you love, Elena. I can do it quietly, legally, and you'll never be able to prove it was me. The video showed Elena's hands shaking so badly, she almost dropped the phone. You're threatening my family. I'm explaining reality. Victoria returned to her desk, sat down with the calm of someone who'd already won. Sign the NDA. Take the severance. Move on with your life. Or don't, and watch everything you care about burn down around you. Your choice. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at a frozen frame of Victoria's face, cold, calculating, monstrous. I closed my laptop. My hands were shaking. My breath was coming in short, sharp bursts. I stood up, paced my tiny apartment, tried to process what I'd just seen. That was my wife, the woman I'd slept beside for 8 years, the woman I'd made vows to, built a life with, tried desperately to be enough for. She wasn't just a thief. She was something worse, someone who would casually, methodically, destroy anyone who threatened her, who could blackmail and threaten and create entire fake cases against innocent people with the same ease most people made dinner reservations. How had I not seen it? How had I lived with her for nearly a decade and never understood what she truly was? But even as I asked the question, I knew the answer. Because I'd never looked. I'd been so caught up in my own inadequacy, so focused on trying to measure up to her standards, that I'd never stopped to question whether her standards were worth measuring up to. I'd accepted her version of reality without examination, had let her define truth because she was smarter, more successful, more certain than I could ever be. I'd been a coward, and my cowardice had blinded me. My phone rang, the sound sharp and jarring in the quiet apartment. I looked at the screen and felt my stomach drop. Victoria. She was calling me. Right now, while I sat, surrounded by evidence of her crimes, while the video of her threatening Elena was still fresh in my mind, she was calling. I should ignore it, should let it go to voicemail, should have nothing to do with her until I'd figured out what to do with Elena's evidence. But something in me, maybe stupidity, maybe curiosity, maybe the need to see if I could detect the monster when I knew what to look for, made me answer. Hello? Daniel. Her voice was clipped, professional. No warmth, no greeting, just my name, stated like an accusation. We need to talk. About what? About the fact that you haven't signed the divorce papers yet. My lawyer tells me they were delivered to your Seattle address 3 days ago. I need them back by Monday. I've been busy. I don't care if you've been busy. This is important. Sign them. Return them. Stop wasting my time. She paused, and I heard something in her voice I'd rarely heard before. Uncertainty. Where are you getting the money for this, anyway? That apartment, the move, starting over in an expensive city on a teacher's salary, how are you affording it? Was she actually asking? Or was she fishing, trying to figure out if I had resources she didn't know about, angles she hadn't covered? The job pays well, I said carefully. Better than teaching high school. $240,000 isn't that much. Not enough to live comfortably in Seattle and handle moving expenses, and... She stopped herself. Never mind. It's not my concern anymore. Just sign the papers. There was something in her voice, something I'd never heard before. It took me a moment to identify it. She was worried. Beneath the brusque demands and the irritation, Victoria was actually concerned about something. About me? No. Victoria didn't worry about people. She worried about variables she couldn't control. And suddenly, I was a variable she couldn't control. I'll sign them when I'm ready, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You said you wanted this done by end of quarter. That's still 2 weeks away. You'll get your papers. Daniel, is there anything else? Silence on the other end. I could practically hear her recalculating, trying to figure out why I was suddenly pushing back, what had changed. The old Daniel would have apologized immediately, would have promised to sign them tonight, would have bent over backward to accommodate her schedule. This Daniel, the one who'd spent the last 6 hours discovering his wife was a criminal, was done bending. No, she said finally. Nothing else. Just get it done. She hung up without saying goodbye. Par for the course. I sat there holding my phone, and something crystallized inside me. A decision taking shape, hardening from possibility into certainty. Victoria had spent our entire marriage making me feel small, inadequate, like I was lucky she'd chosen me, like I should be grateful for the crumbs of affection she occasionally threw my way. She'd built an entire world where she was the center, the sun, the source of all light and meaning, and I was just a minor planet in distant orbit. But she'd been lying the whole time. About everything. About who she was, about where her wealth came from, about the foundation our life together was built on. And now I had proof. I picked up my phone and texted Elena. I've reviewed everything on the drive. You were right. About all of it. When are you meeting with the FBI? Her response came within seconds. Next Friday. Will you help? I thought about Victoria's voice on the phone, about her threats to Elena's family, about the cold calculation in her eyes in that video, about 8 years of being made to feel like nothing, about the fact that she'd never actually loved me, maybe never actually loved anyone, maybe didn't know how. I typed, yes, I'll help. Tell me what you need. Three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, thank you. I'll call you tomorrow. We need to prepare. She can't know we're working together. She won't, I replied. I set down my phone and looked around my apartment. Boxes still unpacked. Furniture I hadn't bought yet. A life I was still building from the ground up. It would have been so easy to ignore all of this. To let Elena fight her battle alone. To sign the divorce papers and move on and pretend the past 8 years had been nothing more than a mistake, a wrong turn, a chapter closed. But that would be the old Daniel. The coward. The man who looked away when things got difficult. This Daniel, the one who'd crossed the country to start over, who'd walked away from comfortable misery, who'd chosen himself for the first time in years, this Daniel was going to do something different. This Daniel was going to tell the truth, even if it burned everything down. Especially if it burned everything down. Outside my window, the Seattle rain continued its patient work, wearing away stone, reshaping the landscape one drop at a time. Persistent, relentless, inevitable. I could be persistent too. I opened my laptop again and started making notes. Everything I remembered about our finances. Every time Victoria had been vague about money. Every trip she'd taken that seemed excessive. Every moment I'd questioned something and she'd made me feel stupid for questioning. Evidence, context, truth. By the time I finished, the sun was coming up again, my second sunrise without sleep, and I had 15 pages of observations that would help Elena build her case. 15 pages that would help destroy Victoria. And for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel guilty about it. I felt free. The week that followed felt like living in two realities simultaneously. In one reality, I was Daniel Cooper, director of STEM curriculum at Seattle Tech Academy, settling into a new job and a new city. I attended meetings about course structure and student outcomes. I revised syllabi and interviewed potential teaching candidates. I went to lunch with colleagues and learned their names and their stories. I laughed at jokes and contributed to brainstorming sessions and slowly, steadily built the professional life I'd moved across the country to find. In the other reality, I was Daniel Cooper, ex-husband of a criminal, preparing to help the FBI take down one of the most successful CEOs in the tech industry. I spent my evenings on encrypted calls with Elena, going through evidence and timelines. I wrote detailed accounts of our marriage, our finances, every conversation I could remember about money. I became intimately familiar with wire transfer protocols and shell company structures and the specific statutes Victoria had violated. The two realities existed side by side, separated by the thinnest of membranes, and I moved between them with increasing ease. It was exhausting. It was necessary. Elena called me every night at 9. After she'd finished her day job, she was working as a temp now, admin work at a law firm, taking whatever she could get after Victoria had destroyed her reputation in tech. We'd talk for hours. Her, walking me through evidence. Me, providing context only a spouse could provide. Tell me about her spending habits, Elena said on Tuesday night. I was sitting on my air mattress with my laptop balanced on my knees, the city lights of Seattle glittering outside my window like stars that had fallen to earth. Excessive, I said, but I never questioned it. She was a billionaire, or I thought she was. Why wouldn't she spend freely? Give me specifics. The FBI will want specifics. I closed my eyes, thinking back. Designer clothes. Not just expensive, but exclusively designer. She had a closet the size of most people's bedrooms, filled with things she'd wear once and never touch again. Shoes that cost thousands of dollars. She once spent $40,000 on a handbag. I remember because I saw the receipt and nearly had a heart attack. She just laughed, said it was an investment piece. Investment, Elena repeated, and I could hear her typing. She used that word a lot. Everything was an investment. The cars, the art, the properties. I wonder if that's how she justified it to herself. Not stealing, just investing. Maybe. I opened my eyes, stared at the ceiling with its water stain that looked vaguely like a map of somewhere. There were trips, too. She'd disappear for a weekend, say it was business. London, Singapore, Dubai. I never went with her. She said it would be boring, just meetings and dinners with investors. But now I'm wondering, If she was checking on her offshore accounts, Elena finished. Moving money around, setting up new shells, managing her empire. Daniel, do you remember specific dates? Trips that seemed unusual? I did. I remembered all of them. Remembered each time she'd left and the strange relief I'd felt at her absence, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved. I gave Elena dates and destinations, watched her cross-reference them with financial records, saw patterns emerge that I'd been too close to see before. There, Elena said, triumph in her voice. April 2022, she went to the Caymans. 3 days later, $5 million was deposited into an account at Cayman National Bank. July, same year, Singapore. 2 days after she returns, 3 million moves from Meridian to Strategic Innovation Holdings, which is registered in Singapore. She wasn't even trying to hide it, Daniel. She was just betting no one would look. And no one did. Except you. Except me. She paused. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we meet with the FBI, once this becomes official, there's no going back. Victoria will know you helped. She'll come after you. Let her, I said, surprised by the hardness in my own voice. I'm done being afraid of her. Okay, Elena said softly. Okay, then let's make sure we do this right. Wednesday morning, I got an email from Victoria's lawyer. Subject line, urgent, divorce proceedings. Mr. Cooper, we note that you have not yet returned the signed divorce documents despite multiple requests from our client. Mrs. Ashford is prepared to move forward with or without your cooperation, but would prefer to handle this matter amicably and efficiently. Please be advised that if the documents are not received by end of business Friday, we will be forced to pursue alternative legal remedies. Mrs. Ashford has been more than generous in the settlement offer, and any delay on your part may result in a revision of terms that would be less favorable to you. We await your prompt response. Sincerely, Robert Chen, Esquire, Chen and Associates. I read it 3 times, looking for threats between the lines. Alternative legal remedies, less favorable terms. The language was careful, professional, but the message was clear. Sign now or face consequences. The old Daniel would have panicked, would have signed immediately, apologized for the delay, done whatever Victoria wanted to avoid conflict. This Daniel opened a new email and typed, Mr. Chen, I am reviewing the documents carefully with my own legal counsel. I will return them when the review is complete. Given that we are still within the time frame, Mrs. Ashford specified, end of quarter, I see no reason for urgency or threats. The settlement offer may be generous by Mrs. Ashford's standards, but I am entitled to ensure my interests are protected. I'm sure you understand. Regards, Daniel Cooper. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately forwarded the whole exchange to Elena. Her response came within minutes. Oh my God, who are you and what did you do with Doormat, Daniel? That's a compliment, BTW. She's rattled. This is good. Was Victoria rattled? I tried to imagine her reading my email, tried to picture her reaction. Would she be angry? Confused? Would she even care? Or was this just another minor annoyance in her day? My phone rang. Victoria, again. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Yes? What the hell are you doing? No preamble. No pretense of civility. Just pure, undiluted anger. You're holding up the divorce because why, exactly? You think you can get more money out of me? You think, I think I'm entitled to have a lawyer review the documents. I interrupted, amazed at how calm I sounded. That's standard practice, Victoria. Surely your expensive attorneys told you that. You don't need a lawyer. The settlement is fair. More than fair. I'm giving you money you're not entitled to. Money you didn't earn. Money from where? I asked suddenly. That's what I'm curious about. Where exactly is all this money coming from, Victoria? Meridian stock options? Personal savings? Offshore accounts in the Caymans? The silence on the other end was profound. It stretched for 3 seconds. 4, 5, an eternity in telephone conversation. I could practically hear Victoria's mind working. calculating what I knew, how I'd found out, what game I was playing. What are you talking about? Her voice was careful now, controlled. The anger had been replaced by something more dangerous. Attention. Nothing, I said. Just curious about our finances, about where the money came from for that house, those cars, that lifestyle. I was never very involved in the financial side of our marriage. Maybe I should have been. Daniel, the way she said my name, a warning, a threat, whatever you think you know. I don't think I know anything. I lied. I'm just asking questions. Isn't that allowed? We were married for 8 years, Victoria. Don't I have a right to understand where our money came from? Another pause. Then, sign the papers by Friday, or I will make the rest of your life very, very difficult. Difficult how? Seattle Tech Academy is a small institution, Daniel, dependent on grants and donations and the goodwill of wealthy benefactors. It would be a shame if some of those benefactors decided their money could be better spent elsewhere. If the board started hearing rumors about their new director of curriculum, about his past, about his instability, are you threatening my job? I was standing now, pacing my small apartment, adrenaline flooding my system. Are you actually threatening to destroy my career because I won't sign your divorce papers fast enough? I'm explaining reality, she said, and I flashed back to that video, to her using those exact words with Elena. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You're acting irrationally. People might start to wonder why. They might start to ask questions. Let them ask, I said. I've got nothing to hide. Can you say the same? I heard her breath catch a tiny sound, barely audible, but I heard it. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? It means sign the papers when I'm ready. It means leave my job alone. And it means maybe, just maybe, you should worry less about me and more about your own situation. I paused. How are things at Meridian, by the way? Board still happy? Investors still confident? No unexpected questions about finances? Daniel. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I'd just threatened Victoria Ashford. Actually threatened her. Implied I knew things that could hurt her. What the hell had I just done? My phone immediately started ringing again. Victoria. I declined the call. She called again. Declined. Again. Declined. Then a text. Call me back, right now. I turned off my phone and sat on my air mattress, trying to breathe, trying to process what had just happened. I'd poked the bear. More than poked, I'd practically walked into the cave and announced my presence. And Victoria wasn't stupid. She'd know I was working with someone. Would know that someone had given me information. Would start looking into who and how and what I planned to do with it. I just accelerated the timeline. Made myself a target. My laptop chimed Elena, calling via encrypted video chat. Tell me you didn't just do what I think you did, she said, as soon as her face appeared on screen. She looked panicked, her eyes wide. Tell me you didn't just tip off Victoria that you know something. I didn't mean to. She called, started threatening my job, and I couldn't let her do it. I couldn't let her think she could still control me. Daniel, we had a plan. We were supposed to stay quiet until the FBI meeting. Now she knows something's wrong. She'll start covering her tracks, destroying evidence. Or she'll make a mistake. I countered. She's not used to being challenged. She's used to people folding the second she pushes. Maybe if we push back, she'll panic, do something stupid. Elena stared at me through the screen, and I watched her cycle through emotions, anger, fear, and then, slowly, something that might have been respect. You've changed, she said finally. From the person she described, from the doormat husband who never stood up for himself. Yeah, well, turns out leaving her was good for my spine. This is dangerous, Daniel. You know that, right? If she figures out we're working together before we get to the FBI, I know, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time to stop being careful. I leaned toward the camera. Elena, we have the evidence. We have the documents, the videos, the wire transfers. We have everything we need. And now we have her attention. Let her worry. Let her wonder what we know. Let her make the next move. Elena was quiet for a long moment, chewing her bottom lip. The FBI meeting is Friday. 3 days. Can you hold out for 3 days without tipping her off further? I can try. Not good enough. You have to. Daniel, listen to me. If Victoria realizes we're about to go to the FBI, if she understands the full scope of what we have, she won't just threaten you. She'll come after you with everything she has. And she has a lot, I understand. Do you? Do you really? Because I've seen what she does to people who cross her. I've lived it. And you're about to become enemy number one. I thought about that. About what it would mean to have Victoria Ashford as an enemy, to have her vast resources, her connections, her ruthless intelligence, all focused on destroying me. It should have terrified me. Maybe it would have, a month ago. But I'd already lost everything that mattered to her. The house, the lifestyle, the association with her success. What else could she take? My job? I'd find another. My reputation? I'd rebuild it. My peace of mind? That I'd already taken back for myself. I'm ready, I said. Whatever comes next, I'm ready for it. Elena nodded slowly. Okay, then we stick to the plan. Friday at 10 a.m., FBI field office downtown. We present everything we have. We tell them about the shell companies, the wire transfers, the offshore accounts. We show them that video of her threatening me. And you, she pointed at me through the screen, you tell them about your marriage, about the spending, the trips, the lifestyle that never quite made sense. You give them context. I will. And Daniel? Until then, you don't contact her. You don't answer her calls. You don't respond to emails. You go dark. Can you do that? Yes. Promise me. I promise. After the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and thought about the next 3 days. 72 hours between now and the moment everything changed. Between Victoria Ashford, untouchable CEO, and Victoria Ashford, federal criminal investigation subject. 72 hours for her to figure out what was coming, to prepare, to strike first. My phone still powered off, sat on the desk like an unexploded bomb. I knew if I turned it on, there would be dozens of messages from Victoria, threats and demands, and attempts at manipulation. The full arsenal of tactics she'd used on me for 8 years. But those tactics only worked if I cared what she thought. If I still believed, on some level, that she was right about me. That I was less than her. That I needed her. That leaving was the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't believe that anymore. I opened my laptop and pulled up the document I'd been working on, my statement for the FBI. 15 pages had grown to 23 as I remembered more details, more moments that suddenly made sense in this new context. The time she'd disappeared for a week and came back with a tan from a business trip to Miami, except she'd never mentioned Miami before and had no meetings on her calendar. The way she'd insisted on keeping our finances completely separate, my teaching salary going into one account that I controlled, everything else managed by her alone. The conversations about money that always ended with her telling me I wouldn't understand, that high-level finance was complicated, that I should just trust her. I should have asked more questions, should have demanded transparency, should have insisted on being a partner in our financial life instead of a passenger. But I'd been trained not to ask. Trained to accept her expertise, her superiority, her version of reality. Never again. I added another paragraph to my statement, capturing a memory I'd just recalled. In 2021, Victoria told me she was establishing a charitable foundation to support STEM education in underserved communities. She said she was donating $5 million of her own money. I was proud of her. It seemed like the first genuinely altruistic thing she'd done. Looking back, I wonder if that charitable foundation was just another shell company, another way to move money around while looking philanthropic. I wonder if those underserved kids ever saw a penny of that $5 million, or if it ended up in an account in Switzerland. My phone buzzed, someone calling my turned-off phone. The vibration transmitted through the desk. It buzzed again and again, persistent, desperate. Victoria, probably. Wondering why I'd gone silent, calculating what it meant. Let her wonder. Let her calculate. Let her spend the next 3 days trying to figure out what I knew and what I planned to do with it. Meanwhile, I'd be preparing, building the case, making sure that when the moment came, when we walked into that FBI office and laid everything out, there would be no doubt, no wiggle room. No way for Victoria to charm or threaten or manipulate her way out of what was coming. Friday, 3 days. I could last 3 days. Outside my window, Seattle was settling into its evening rhythm lights in windows, cars on streets, the steady pulse of a city that didn't know or care about the small domestic drama playing out in one of its countless apartments. A man preparing to betray his wife, or a man preparing to tell the truth about his wife. Same action, different framing. I knew which one I believed. I saved my document, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, Elena's paranoia was rubbing off on me, and finally allowed myself to power on my phone. 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, all from Victoria. I scrolled through them, watching her emotional progression. Anger, to frustration, to confusion, to something that almost looked like concern. The last one, sent 20 minutes ago. Daniel, whatever you think you're doing, whatever game this is, stop. Please, call me. We need to talk about this, like adults. Please, Victoria had said, please. The world really was ending. I typed back, I'll call you after I've signed the papers, probably Monday, then added, have a good weekend. Send. Let her sit with that. Let her spend the weekend wondering what I meant, what I knew, what I was planning. Let her feel, for once, what it was like to be powerless. 3 days. Then, everything changed. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of Seattle rain that felt personal, cold, insistent, the kind that found its way under your collar no matter how carefully you dressed. I stood at my apartment window with my 3rd cup of coffee, watching the city wake up, and felt time ticking down like a countdown clock. 24 hours until the FBI meeting. 24 hours until I walked into a federal building and handed over evidence that would destroy Victoria's life. 24 hours to change my mind. I wouldn't, of course. I'd come too far, learned too much, seen too clearly what she really was. But the weight of what was coming sat heavy in my chest, making it hard to breathe properly. This wasn't just about Victoria anymore. This was about justice, about truth, about making sure she couldn't do to anyone else what she'd done to Elena, what she'd probably done to countless others. My phone buzzed. Not Victoria this time. I'd blocked her number last night after her 47th call, but Elena, ready for tomorrow? I typed back, as ready as I'll ever be. You? Terrified, but in a good way, like jumping out of a plane, kind of terrified. Let's hope the parachute opens. It will. We have too much evidence for it not to. I wanted to believe that, wanted to trust in the clean certainty of facts and documents and numbers that didn't lie. But I'd watched enough true crime documentaries to know that sometimes, even with overwhelming evidence, powerful people found ways to slip through the cracks, to lawyer their way out of consequences, to turn accusations back on their accusers. Victoria was nothing if not powerful. Another text from Elena. By the way, did you ever hear from anyone else at Meridian? Any other employees reaching out? No. Why? Just wondering if anyone else had figured out what she was doing. If anyone else might have evidence we don't know about. The thought hadn't occurred to me. I'd been so focused on Elena's documentation, on what I knew from my marriage, that I hadn't considered there might be others. Other assistants, other employees who'd seen things that didn't add up. Other people Victoria had threatened or fired or destroyed. Do you think there are others? Maybe. Probably. A scheme this big, running this long, she couldn't have kept it completely invisible. Someone else must have noticed something. But would they talk? After what she did to you? That's the question, isn't it? I was about to respond when my phone rang. Unknown number. Seattle area code. I almost didn't answer Elena, and I had agreed to keep communications limited today, to not take any unnecessary risks, but something made me pick up. Hello? Is this Daniel Cooper? A woman's voice, Young, nervous, not Elena. Yes, who's this? My name is Melissa Park. I know this is going to sound strange, but I work at Meridian Global, in accounting, and I think we need to talk. My heart rate kicked up several notches. I walked away from the window, sat down on my air mattress. How did you get my number? Elena gave it to me. She said you were helping her with the investigation, and I have information, things I've been documenting for the past year, things about Mrs. Ashford that I think you need to know. Elena gave you my number? That seemed like a security breach. We'd agreed to be careful, to not involve anyone else until after the FBI meeting. Why didn't she tell me? She doesn't know I'm calling. I just got her number from old company emails, called her this morning. She was suspicious at first, thought it might be a trap, Victoria trying to find out what she knew. But I proved I was legitimate. I sent her some of my documentation. Melissa's voice dropped lower, like she was worried about being overheard. Mr. Cooper, I have evidence of transfers Elena doesn't know about. Newer stuff, from the last 6 months. Mrs. Ashford has been moving even more money, faster, like she knows something's coming. That made a horrible kind of sense. If Victoria had suspected Elena was building a case, she'd have started covering her tracks. Moving evidence, shifting money, preparing for eventual investigation. She was too smart to just sit still and hope no one noticed. What kind of evidence? Wire transfers to new shell companies, accounts I've never seen before in the Caymans, Seychelles, places with even less oversight. She's been liquidating assets, selling off properties through those shells, converting everything to cash. In the last month alone, she's moved over $50 million. Melissa paused. Mr. Cooper, I think she's preparing to run. The room tilted slightly. Run. Victoria was preparing to run. To disappear before the investigation could catch her, before the FBI could freeze her accounts and seize her assets. She'd take her stolen money and vanish to some country without extradition treaties, live out her life on some tropical island or in some European villa, untouchable and unpunished. You're sure? I'm an accountant. I see patterns. This is a pattern I've seen before in case studies about financial criminals who flee. Liquidation, consolidation, movement to hard-to-trace accounts. She's preparing an exit strategy. Then we need to move faster. The FBI meeting is tomorrow. I know, Elena told me. I want to come. I want to give them my evidence too. Melissa's voice strengthened. Mrs. Ashford needs to be stopped. What she did to Elena, what she's been doing to the company people trust Meridian, employees, investors, they believe in what we're building. And she's been betraying that trust, stealing from all of us, and I can't just stand by and let her get away with it. It's dangerous, I warned. Look what happened to Elena. If Victoria finds out you're working against her, she already suspects. I've been careful. But last week she called me into her office, asked me about some quarterly reports, pointed out what she called inconsistencies in my work. It was a test. She was trying to figure out if I'd noticed anything, if I was a threat. Melissa laughed, a sound with no humor in it. I played dumb, apologized, said I'd been overwhelmed, promised to be more careful. She smiled and told me she appreciated my dedication to the company. But I saw her eyes, Mr. Cooper. She was evaluating me, deciding whether to destroy me now or wait. I knew that look, had seen it directed at me more times than I could count. That cold calculation, that assessment of threat level and response required. Victoria treated people like problems to be solved, variables in an equation she needed to balance. Tomorrow morning, I said, 10 a.m., FBI field office downtown. Elena will text you the address. I'll be there. Relief flooded her voice. Thank you for doing this, for not just walking away and letting her. I walked away from the marriage, I interrupted. But I'm not walking away from this. Not anymore. After we hung up, I immediately called Elena. Tell me you know about Melissa Park, I said as soon as she answered. I was about to call you. She contacted me this morning, showed me evidence I didn't have. Daniel, if what she's saying is true, Victoria's preparing to flee the country. We might have less time than we thought. Should we move up the FBI meeting? Go today? I already tried. The agent we're scheduled to meet with is in depositions all day. Tomorrow morning is the earliest. Elena sounded frustrated, scared. We just have to hope Victoria doesn't run in the next 24 hours. What if she does? Then we give the FBI everything we have, and they issue warrants and put out alerts and try to find her. But Daniel, if she makes it to a non-extradition country with her money, she might never face justice. She might just vanish and live happily ever after on stolen millions, while Elena, Melissa, and everyone else she's hurt just have to accept it. The unfairness of it made my chest tight. After everything, after all the documentation and courage and risk, Victoria might still win, might still escape, might still prove that being rich and ruthless was all that mattered in the end. No, I said. That's not going to happen. He were sending Crispin rested. He were sending resting mining. How can you be sure? Because Victoria doesn't run. That's not who she is. She fights. She destroys people who threaten her. She doesn't flee. She makes her enemies flee. I was pacing now, thinking through what I knew about my almost ex-wife. She's moving money, yes, creating backup plans. But she won't run unless she thinks she's already lost. And right now, she doesn't know what we have. Doesn't know we're meeting with the FBI tomorrow. She's scared, but she's not defeated. You sound very certain. I was married to her for 8 years. I know how she thinks. I paused. She's probably trying to figure out what I know right now, trying to determine if I'm a real threat or just a soon-to-be ex-husband being difficult about divorce papers. If I can convince her I'm the latter, she'll relax, drop her guard. How are you going to convince her of that? An idea was forming, risky but potentially effective. I'm going to call her tonight. I'm going to tell her I overreacted, that I was just angry about the divorce, that I'll sign the papers this weekend. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants to hear. Daniel, that's dangerous. If she suspects you're lying, she won't, because she wants to believe it. She wants to believe I'm still the weak husband who folds when she pushes. I'll give her that belief. And while she's relaxing, thinking she's won, we'll be walking into the FBI office tomorrow morning. Elena was quiet for a long moment. You've really changed, she said finally. The man Victoria described to me, the doormat, the failure, the disappointing teacher husband, he wouldn't have thought of this. That man died somewhere between Connecticut and Seattle, I said. This is someone else. Okay, then do it. Call her tonight. Convince her. Buy us one more day. Elena paused. And Daniel? Be careful. Don't underestimate her. She's dangerous when cornered. So am I said. Turns out. I spent the rest of the day at work, going through the motions of curriculum review and meetings, while my mind churned through what I'd say to Victoria. How to sound defeated without sounding suspicious. How to give her the win she wanted while keeping her from looking too closely at what I was really doing. Sarah caught me staring into space during an afternoon planning session. You okay? She asked quietly, while the others argued about AP physics course requirements. You seem distracted. Just a lot on my mind. Personal stuff. The divorce? I'd mentioned it to her in passing. Kept it vague. She didn't need to know the details. Didn't need to know that my ex-wife was a criminal and I was about to help federal agents take her down. Yeah. Almost done though. Should be finalized soon. That's good. Clean breaks are better than dragging things out. She studied me with those sharp, observant eyes. For what it's worth, you seem happier here. Lighter, somehow. Whatever you left behind in Connecticut, I think leaving was the right choice. Thanks, I said, and meant it. I think so too. After work, I bought dinner from a Thai place down the street, pad Thai, that I barely tasted, and returned to my apartment, sat on my air mattress, stared at my phone. 7 p.m. in Seattle meant 10 p.m. in Connecticut. Victoria would be home, probably working, definitely annoyed that I'd been ignoring her calls. Perfect time to reach out. Perfect time to sound apologetic and defeated. I unblocked her number and called. She answered on the first ring. Finally. Hi, Victoria. Don't hi, Victoria. Me. What the hell is going on with you? You've been ignoring my calls, making cryptic comments, playing games with the divorce papers. What are you trying to accomplish? I took a breath, let it out slowly, made my voice small, uncertain. The voice of the old Daniel. I'm sorry. It's been hard, okay? The move, the new job, everything changing. And then the divorce papers showed up and it all felt so final and I reacted badly. Silence on the other end. She was listening, evaluating, trying to determine if I was lying. I said things I shouldn't have said, I continued. Asked questions that weren't my business. I was angry and hurt, and I lashed out. I'm sorry. Questions about what? Her voice was careful, controlled. What exactly were you implying, Daniel? Nothing. I wasn't implying anything. Our finances were always your domain, you know? And suddenly I'm looking at this settlement offer and wondering where all this money came from, how we afforded the lifestyle we had. Not because I think there's anything wrong, just because I never understood it. Never understood how you built what you built. So you decided to what? Investigate me? Hire a lawyer to dig into my finances? No. God, no. I let my voice crack slightly, like I was on the edge of tears. It wasn't hard. I was exhausted and scared, and the weight of what I was about to do tomorrow was crushing me. I just wanted to understand. Wanted to feel like I'd been a real partner in our marriage, instead of just a passenger. But I get it now. I was never going to understand what you do. I was never going to be at your level. And that's okay. I can accept that. More silence. I could practically hear her thinking, weighing my words, looking for traps. I'll sign the papers, I said. This weekend. I'll overnight them Monday. You'll have them by Tuesday. And then we're done. We can both move on. Just like that? She sounded suspicious. After all the drama, you're suddenly ready to cooperate. I'm tired, Victoria. I'm tired of being angry. Tired of fighting. Tired of trying to be something I'm not. You were right. About everything. About me being limited. About Seattle being the best I could do. About me never measuring up. You were right, and I was stupid for thinking I could. I stopped. Let the sentence hang unfinished. Could what? Nothing. It doesn't matter anymore. I injected defeat into every word. You win, like you always do. I'm signing the papers. I'm letting go. I hope that makes you happy. Daniel. Her voice softened slightly, and I wondered if I'd overdone it. If I'd made myself sound too pathetic. You're not limited. You're a good teacher. You're smart, capable. Just not smart or capable enough for you. That's not what I... She stopped herself, and when she spoke again, the softness was gone. Sign the papers. Move on with your life. And Daniel? Stop asking questions about things that don't concern you anymore. What I did with our money. Where it came from. How I built my company. That's no longer your business. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Good. She paused. For what it's worth, I hope Seattle works out for you. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Thanks, I said, and meant it in a way she couldn't possibly understand. I think I already have. I hung up before she could respond, before she could hear the lie underneath my defeat. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But I'd done it. I'd given her the performance she needed to see, the weak husband accepting defeat, the threat neutralized. Tomorrow morning, she'd wake up thinking she'd won, thinking the divorce would proceed smoothly, thinking I'd been brought to heel one last time. Tomorrow morning, I'd be walking into an FBI office with Elena and Melissa, with evidence that would destroy everything Victoria had built on lies and theft. I texted Elena, called her. She bought it. We're good for tomorrow. Her response? You're sure? I'm sure. She thinks I'm defeated. She'll relax. And when she relaxes, we strike. Okay, get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. Sleep. Right. Like that was going to happen. I lay on my air mattress, staring at the ceiling, running through tomorrow's plan over and over. We'd meet outside the FBI building at 9:30. Elena, Melissa, and me. 3 people Victoria had underestimated, carrying evidence she never thought anyone would find. We'd present our case, show them the shell companies, the wire transfers, the video of her threatening Elena, the pattern of fraud stretching back years. We'd give them everything, and they'd have no choice but to investigate, to freeze her accounts, to bring charges. Justice wasn't guaranteed. Rich people got away with crimes all the time, but at least we'd try. At least we'd do everything we could to make sure Victoria faced consequences for what she'd done. At least we'd tell the truth. My phone buzzed one last time. Victoria, texting, "Get those papers signed. And Daniel, take care of yourself. You deserved better than what I gave you." I stared at the message for a long time. Was that remorse, guilt, or just Victoria being magnanimous in victory, offering scraps of kindness to the defeated opponent? It didn't matter. Tomorrow, none of it would matter. I typed back, "You too. Take care." Then I turned off my phone, closed my eyes, and waited for morning to come. The last morning of Victoria Ashford's untouchable life. The first morning of whatever came next. Friday morning dawned clear and cold. The kind of Seattle morning that felt like a promise. No rain for once. Just crisp air and pale sunlight that made the city look new, scrubbed clean, ready for what came next. I dressed carefully, slacks, button-down shirt, the blazer I'd bought for interviews. Professional, credible, the kind of person federal agents would take seriously. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. 2 weeks ago, I'd been someone else entirely, someone smaller. This Daniel looked ready. I arrived at the federal building at 9:15, 15 minutes early. The structure was imposing gray concrete and dark windows, the kind of building designed to remind you that the government was serious business. No decoration, no warmth, just function and authority rendered in stone. Elena was already there, pacing near the entrance, with a messenger bag clutched to her chest like armor. She looked pale but determined, her hair pulled back severely, wearing a suit that was slightly too big, borrowed probably, since Victoria had destroyed her finances. "Daniel." She grabbed my arm when she saw me. "Melissa's not here yet. She texted 10 minutes ago saying she was on her way. But what if she changed her mind? What if Victoria got to her? She'll be here." "How can you be sure?" "Because she called me," I said. "Because she documented evidence. Because she's like you. She can't stand by and watch someone get away with this." I checked my phone. "We still have 15 minutes. She'll make it." Elena nodded, not quite convinced, but wanting to believe. We stood together in the morning cold, watching people flow in and out of the building. Lawyers with briefcases, people called for jury duty looking resigned, federal employees with ID badges clipped to their belts. At 9:28, Melissa arrived in a rush, her breath coming in quick, gasps like she'd been running. She was younger than I expected, mid-20s, Asian, with glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She carried a backpack that looked heavy enough to contain evidence. Sorry. The bus was late, and then I couldn't find parking." She stopped, seeing our faces. "I'm here. I made it. I have everything." "You're sure about this?" Elena asked. "Once we go in there, once we make this official, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." Melissa adjusted her backpack straps. "Let's do this before I lose my nerve." We walked in together, 3 people Victoria had underestimated, and approached the security desk. Metal detectors, X-ray machines, guards who looked bored until Elena said we had a meeting with Special Agent Rebecca Morrison. Then we weren't boring anymore. We were escorted to the 3rd floor, down a hallway that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee, into a conference room with a long table and no windows, the kind of room where confessions happened, where deals were made, where lives changed direction. Special Agent Morrison was already waiting. She was in her 40s, dark hair streaked with gray, eyes that had seen enough lies to spot them instantly. She stood when we entered, shook each of our hands with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "Miss Park, Mr. Cooper, Miss Chen, thank you for coming." She gestured to the chairs. "Please, sit." Can I get anyone water? Coffee? We all declined. We sat. We waited, while Agent Morrison settled across from us with a legal pad and a digital recorder. Before we begin, she said, I want to make sure you all understand what this meeting is. You've brought allegations of serious financial crimes against Victoria Ashford, CEO of Meridian Global. If your evidence supports those allegations, this will become a formal investigation. Miss Ashford will be notified. Her assets may be frozen, charges may be filed. This isn't a casual conversation. This has consequences. Are we all clear? We're clear, Elena said, her voice steady. We have evidence, substantial evidence, and we're prepared to testify. All right then. Agent Morrison pressed record on the device. Let's start at the beginning. Elena went first. She walked Agent Morrison through her time as Victoria's assistant, the discrepancies she'd noticed, the documentation she'd collected. She showed spreadsheets and wire transfers, explained shell companies and offshore accounts, laid out a pattern of fraud spanning 5 years. Agent Morrison took notes, asked sharp questions, never once looked skeptical. She was all business, all focus. When Elena showed her the video, Victoria threatening her family, admitting to fabricating evidence, the agent's expression hardened. This is good, she said. This is very good. What else do you have? Melissa went next, pulling documents from her backpack that detailed the most recent transfers. $50 million moved in the last month alone. Property sales, asset liquidation, money flowing to accounts in countries with minimal oversight. She's preparing to run, Melissa explained. I think she suspects an investigation is coming. She's been consolidating, moving everything to places where it'll be harder to trace or seize. Do you think she'll flee before we can move on this? Agent Morrison asked. I don't know. Maybe. That's why we came to you now instead of waiting. The agent nodded, made more notes. Then she turned to me. Mr. Cooper, you were married to Miss Ashford for 8 years. What can you tell us about her finances during that time? Her lifestyle, spending habits, anything that seemed unusual? I pulled out my own document, 23 pages of observations, memories, details that suddenly made sense in context. I told her about the properties I'd never seen, the trips that seemed excessive, the vagueness whenever I asked about money. I told her about Victoria's insistence on keeping our finances separate, about the lifestyle that always seemed slightly beyond what even a successful CEO should afford. She told me once, I said, remembering, that money was just a tool, that having it meant you could do anything, be anything, that you weren't bound by normal rules. I thought she was being philosophical, but maybe she was being literal. Agent Morrison listened to all of it, took notes on all of it. When we finished 90 minutes of evidence and testimony and documentation, she sat back and looked at the three of us with something that might have been respect. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen presented by civilians, she said. You've essentially done half our job for us. We'll need to verify everything, get warrants, build our own case. But, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I can tell you that we will be opening a formal investigation into Victoria Ashford and Meridian Global effective immediately. We'll be freezing her known accounts, obtaining search warrants for company records, and bringing her in for questioning. How long until she knows? Elena asked. Hours, maybe less. Once we start freezing accounts, her banks will notify her. She'll know something's happening. And if she runs, then we'll issue warrants for her arrest. Alert airports, border crossings, put her on watch lists. Agent Morrison's expression was grim. She won't make it far. Not with the amount of money we're talking about. That kind of wealth leaves traces. We left the federal building at 11:30, stepping out into sunlight that felt surreal after the fluorescent intensity of the conference room. For a moment, we just stood there on the steps. 3 people who'd just set something enormous in motion. We did it, Melissa said softly. We actually did it. We told the truth, Elena corrected. Whether she faces consequences, that's up to the FBI now. Up to prosecutors and courts, and all the machinery of justice. She'll face consequences, I said, surprised by my own certainty. People like Agent Morrison don't let cases like this go. Victoria's going down. Elena turned to look at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. Thank you, both of you. I couldn't have done this alone. I tried, and she destroyed me. But together, she wiped her eyes roughly, together, we might actually win. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting maybe Sarah asking about lunch plans or Marcus checking in from Connecticut. Instead, I saw Victoria's name. A text message sent 3 minutes ago. I know what you did. My blood went cold. Another text arrived as I stared at the first. You went to the FBI. You betrayed me. You're going to regret this, Daniel. I promise you that. She knows, I said, showing my phone to Elena and Melissa. She already knows. How? Melissa looked panicked. How could she possibly? She has connections everywhere, Elena said grimly. Probably someone at her bank called the moment the FBI started asking questions. Or she has someone inside the bureau. Or she just figured it out when her account started getting flagged. Another text. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you haven't even begun to understand what you've started. I'll destroy all 3 of you. She's panicking, I said, reading the words over and over. Good. Let her panic. My phone rang. Victoria calling. I declined it. She called again. Declined again. Then a voicemail notification appeared. I put it on speaker so Elena and Melissa could hear. Victoria's voice, cold and controlled despite the fury underneath. You made a mistake, Daniel. A fatal one. You think the FBI scares me? You think you and that disgraced assistant and whoever else you got to help you, you think you can take me down? I've been building contingencies for years. I have lawyers you can't afford. I have resources you can't imagine. And when this is over, when I've proven all your allegations are fabricated, when I've destroyed your credibility in your career and everything you think you're building in Seattle, you'll wish you'd just signed those divorce papers and walked away. The voicemail ended. The 3 of us stood in silence. She's terrified, Elena said finally. I can hear it under the threats. She's absolutely terrified. Good, I said again. She should be. My phone buzzed one more time. Not Victoria this time. Miss Ashford just attempted to access one of her offshore accounts. Bank blocked the transaction and reported it to us. We're moving faster than planned. Expect news soon. I showed the text to the others. Elena laughed, a sound of pure relief and vindication. She's caught, she said. She's actually caught. We were standing on the steps of a federal building in Seattle. 3 people who'd been underestimated and dismissed, and we'd just changed everything. The future was uncertain. Victoria was dangerous. The investigation was just beginning. But for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I'd done something that mattered. Something true. 3 months later, I stood in my new apartment, actually furnished now, with a real bed and a couch and curtains that blocked the morning light, and watched the news on my laptop. Victoria Ashford, former CEO of Meridian Global, was sentenced today to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The 41-year-old tech executive had pleaded guilty to stealing over $200 million from her own company. I turned off the sound. I'd heard enough. The investigation had moved faster than anyone expected. Once the FBI started pulling threads, Victoria's entire empire unraveled. Shell companies, offshore accounts, falsified records, all of it exposed in painful detail. Her lawyers had tried to fight, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, she'd taken a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. 15 years. She'd be 56 when she got out. My phone rang. Elena, did you see? She asked. I saw. How do you feel? I thought about that. How did I feel? Not triumphant, exactly. Not vindicated. Just settled. Like a equation that had finally balanced. I feel free, I said. Elena laughed. Yeah, me too. She paused. Melissa and I are getting dinner tonight. Celebrating. You should come. I'm in Seattle, remember? So fly out. It's Friday. We'll expense it as victory drinks. You earned it. I smiled. Maybe next time. I have plans here. The plans were simple. Dinner with Sarah and the team, then a quiet weekend working on curriculum redesign. Normal things. Good things. a life that was entirely my own. After we hung up, I found the divorce papers in my desk drawer. They'd been finalized 2 months ago, signed remotely from prison. Victoria hadn't contested anything, hadn't asked for anything. She'd just signed and sent them back with no comment. I thought about her prediction that night at dinner, what felt like a lifetime ago. If you ever leave me, you'll come crawling back to apologize. I hadn't crawled back, hadn't apologized, hadn't regretted a single moment of walking away. Instead, I'd built something new, a career I was proud of, friendships that felt genuine, a life that was small by Victoria's standards, but enormous by mine. My phone buzzed, a text from one of my students. "Mr. Cooper, I got into MIT. The recommendation letter you wrote, they said it made the difference. Thank you." I stared at that message and felt something expand in my chest. Pride, purpose, the knowledge that I'd helped shape a young person's future in a way that mattered. Victoria had measured success in millions and market share and magazine covers. She'd built an empire on lies and called it achievement. I was measuring success differently now, in students who understood physics, in honest work, in the ability to look at myself in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. We'll see. I'd told Victoria that last night in Connecticut. Now we had seen, and I'd won.